We are delighted to be here with you today, sharing in this very important seminar that you're having. Sharon and myself are certainly grateful for this opportunity, and we will, as you have extended a very warm and hearty welcome to us, we will seek as best as we can today to fulfill that expectation. We are going to use a particular role play to introduce our session for today, and I'm going to ask Sharon just to give an overview, and then we move into the role play.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. And it is a pleasure to be here. And thank you very much, Pastor Cecil and Sister Kay and everybody else. We are happy to be in New York while feeling warm in Jamaica. And we at the same time, we hope that you will be feeling warm where you are. So this presentation will be done in a form of a role play. We'll start with a little introduction, and you'll hear dialogue between each of us as we go through different aspects. We've called the whole presentation, just to go back, Chronicles of Conflict, Anthems of Forgiveness, How to Fight Fairly and Forgive Freely. And we'll be doing the role play, which will actually go throughout the whole thing. And we will share at different points on the concepts to do with conflict, causes and characteristics, the consequences, suggested cure. We give a little homework. We'll have Q&A and closing remarks. Also, as some of you may know, we have a shorter part 2 on Friday, in which we'll get more time to do practical things in breakout groups and deal with some of the nitty-gritty issues that are not covered today. And so we go into the role play.
And just before, Sharon, I think that just need to highlight something with the background, just before Sharon begins the role play, to say for the records that I am the Reverend, and I bring to you over 38 years of pastoral experience. And Sharon is the doctor. She's actually a medical doctor. And she has been doing seminars, and she has also written a book. And we both are involved in premarital counseling, and I do additional marriage counseling. And so we have been doing seminars of this nature for a number of years, and we share this together with you. So we are bringing the fruit of our years of experience to you. And we both have been directors of a support group for persons who are separated and divorced for over 20 years. And that kind of group counseling and group experience we bring as part of what we share with you today. So I just need to establish that background as we proceed to with this seminar.
And so for the role play, what you will have is I, Sister Sharon, for this role play, I'm a counselor in Rev. Trevor Edwards' counseling ministry. And so I'm going to go to Pastor to explain some of the challenges I've faced recently, and we will take it from there. Good morning, Rev.
Hi, Sister Sharon, how are you? Good to see you. You're looking so bright this morning.
Thank you, Rev. You know, this brightness hides a heaviness of heart, you know, Rev. It really does. Yes, because as you know, in the counseling ministry, I've been so happy to be able to be a part of it and to serve. Yes. However, I don't know, it's like, I don't know if it's since COVID or so on, but I'm just getting shocked out of my wits with the level of conflict I'm hearing among our church brethren. I didn't know good Christian people have so much conflict, Rev. I'm just so surprised. Let me just give you some examples, and it's beginning to feel overwhelming. First and foremost, we have the couples, husband and wife, they're in all kind of conflict. Do you know that this man actually hit his wife in his anger? I cannot believe it. Good churchman like that. You know, and then Another day, this wife, she just walked out of the house, just vexed like that, and refused to talk with her husband. A different couple, you know, not to talk about the premarital couples who are just quarreling in the session, and they're supposed to be in love. Wow. Then, if you think it's just the couples, on top of that, the parents and the children have been home, as you know, working from home. And I don't know if it's that kind of stress. So we find that the parents are getting more impatient with the children, roughing them up. Mm-hmm. And then the children, some of those children are so lippy and disrespectful to their parents. So the kind of clashes I'm seeing, I'm just so distressed. But it goes further, because sad to say, as you know, we've had many losses in the pandemic here. And so with losses, sometimes we see people now, brothers and sisters and so on, quarreling. Is you bring COVID home and kill mama, and those kind of things. So big quarrels going on. And on top of which, not to speak about the actual funeral planning and so on, they fight over what casket, who is to be at the funeral, who is to do what, and they're quarreling about those kinds of things. And after, they are quarreling about, in Jamaica, you know, we call it deadlift. They're quarreling about the inheritance issues. Wow. And so it is just so much, Rev. And then, I don't know, again, maybe because people are working from home more, the neighbors, they are now quarreling with their neighbors in the community, because they say the neighbors turn up the music too loud when they're trying to have their Zoom meetings and things like that. And so they get into quarrels with their neighbors about things. And that never used to happen so much. And if you think that is it, when they go to work, the work colleagues, they're quarreling with their work colleagues to them. Either this one is not carrying their share of their work, they're feeling stressed, they're feeling overwhelmed, or the supervisor is making unreasonable demands when they're working from home, wanting them to work way into the night, even though work hours should stop at regular time, but because they're at home, they're taking advantage of them, and so they're quarreling about that. And then the final one, Rev, in the church, who is quarreling now? Oh, yes, my. Sister so-and-so and brother so-and-so quarreling about seat, who take a seat in church. Church people can quarrel about that. And then who is quarreling about who got to do what and what role they can have. And then when they're not quarreling about that, when you ask them to do things or another leader, they are quarreling about that as well. The leadership not doing this, or the leadership needs to do more of that, or the church needs to do this. And it's just a lot of quarreling. When we should be pulling together in this crisis, I am just hearing so much quarrel, Rev, so much quarrel. I don't know, I feel overwhelmed. What you can tell me, how you can help?
Wow. Sister Sharon, I really, really empathize with you. And I'm so glad that you have come to share this with me. In fact, it is absolutely necessary, because you would be so burdened with all of these concerns that your own mental health could be affected. And so it is good that you're able to unload on someone. And, you know, as a clinical supervisor myself, to be able to monitor and make sure that you take care of your own mental health is very, very important. But the thing with all of these, the thing with all of these conflicts is that it is something that you'll always encounter, and conflict has always been with us. Conflict is just a part of human experience. It's a fact of life. It is natural and inevitable as a part of human interaction and human experience. In fact, Mark Twain made the statement that it is a known fact that our words and actions are the result of our thoughts. One learns people through the heart, not the eyes or the intellect. But then we match that with some other famous words. But the words you speak come from the heart. That's what defiles you. From the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you. And these are words of Jesus. So even Jesus himself discovered the conflicts, and what you have described confirms all of this as the ways in which people express their differences. And if you go back to the beginning of the Old Testament with Cain and Abel and their own differences as to how God responded to the worship they offer, that Cain was very jealous of his brother Abel, and the jealousy in his heart boiled up in his heart, and it led to murder. You see, so much of what you have described here, if we don't deal with these conflicts and deal with these issues early and in an appropriate way, sorry to say that we could have some serious results or consequences of conflict on our hands. So one of the things, a couple of little things I want to say in terms of what are some of the genesis or what is behind some of these conflicts that you have encountered. It has been noted that low self-esteem and self-hate are one of the behind underlying factors that cause people or facilitate or make people become very conflicted. If somebody hates themselves, then this is like they're always picking a fight. And if somebody does not think well of themselves, does not think positive of themselves, does not appreciate the fact that they are a gift from God, does not appreciate the fact that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, they sometimes are not able to manage differences well. And so that becomes an issue. And then there is the matter of, as I said, differences that people have. And I see a hand, I'm going to take that shortly. Differences that people have in terms of values. People have different values. Some things mean more things to other people than other things. We are different based on gender. There are males and there are females, and we see life differently because of who we are. Our whole socialization is different. Some people are brought up in settings or in social contexts or structures where resources were limited. Some were brought up in family contexts where they had more resources and they will see life differently. So a lot depends on person's exposure and how they were socialized and what they had to do. These can cause conflict. And also our beliefs. There are some people who believe that if you are angry, you must not let the sun go down upon your wrath. There are some people who believe that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and I'm going to get my pound of flesh. So these are all the beliefs that people come to the table with, and that can create a lot of discontent. But we just need to remember that conflicts conceptually are struggles resulting from incompatible or opposing needs that people have. There are struggles that arise from incompatible or opposing needs, drives, wishes, external or internal demands that people have. And a noteworthy factor about conflict is the belief that parties' goals and parties' needs and aspirations cannot be achieved simultaneously. And it is such a wrong concept about conflict, because it is where somebody's saying that if I get what I want, you cannot get what you want. And that is so wrong. If I get what I want, you cannot get what you want. And much of this that you talked about, the sibling, the funeral planning, the neighbors, work colleagues, people within the church, about seat and all of that. If I get what I want, you cannot get what you want. And it is to be able to recognize that we have differences. And if these are allowed to persist, they keep us at bay. One other little thing I just want to say conceptually, Sister Sharon, that I want you to bear in mind is that we encounter conflicts that come from within, sometimes in our own lives. And we refer to this as intrapersonal conflict. That is conflict within ourselves. Sometimes we want to do something and we don't want to do another thing. Maybe there are people who have considered they want to go to church face to face, and some say, no, let me not go to church face to face. Let me stay at home and watch the service online. And so there's a conflict there. It is intrapersonal. Okay? there is also interpersonal conflict, which is much of what you have described, which is between people and the values and the ideas and the facts and so on of their lives and the reality that they have to face with. And there are also conflict between teams of individuals. So you have two groups of people within the church, as you have observed. And so you have that kind of team conflict. And you have between two or more teams within an organization. Or you may have between two countries. So that's why you may have one country in Europe decide that they're going to attack another country because they see things differently. And they have certain expectations which they don't feel can be fulfilled or realized in any other way except that by doing this. But what I want to suggest, Sister Sharon, is that I would suggest that you do a little survey and then find out what are some of the causes, what you have picked up. And you may just find that it could be very, very rich in terms of what you find from people. So this could enrich our dialogue and our discussions together. So I suggest you do a little survey and then we could see what happens out of that. So next time we meet, you could tell me what has been the outcome of that survey that you would have done.
Thank you, Reb. I will get to it and then in about a month's time we can meet, right, Reb?
Yes, that would be a good time for us to meet.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We saw a hand. We just pause a second. We saw a hand. James
Robinson.
Robinson.
What I'm going to suggest, if we could hold the questions until we have completed some sections.
And then put it in the chat.
Yeah, or if you put them in the chat so that we can proceed with the presentation, but we will deal with the questions. So I'm going to ask if you hold them until we have completed.
And for those who are not able to type in the chat, if maybe you can contact Sister K in the meantime. Thanks. Rev.
Hello. Hi, Sister Sharon. Good. Well, it's a month already.
Can you believe it?
You know?
No.
Wow.
Time flies,
but it's so good to see you again.
And Rev, I just want to thank you for that assignment.
Okay.
You know, when you suggested that, our church wasn't the only one that has it. This is just normal part of life. Yes. I went and I did that survey. In fact, I sent a survey all the way to New York. And I sent it to a sister in a brilliant sister, she just finished her master's and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, man, and I asked her if she could just survey some people for me and get some feedback. So because, sometimes I just think it's us because Jamaica, we Jamaicans at home, we just so backward and we only have these problems. And it's not real to the church in general. But you, Rev, when you told me it's the human condition from Bible days till now, I did some research and I am going to share, if you don't mind, share with you the result of that survey.
Not at all. Go right ahead, Sister Sharon.
Okay, so here we go now. And this is what came of our survey. First and foremost, we surveyed and we found that the majority of the respondents were female, over 90%. And the age groups, the predominant age groups that came out of that survey of about 21 people in general, it's almost a third each, but slightly larger in the 56 and up and the 46 to 55 age group, and a little less in the 31 to 45 age group, as you can see on that chart on the right, And so that was what came out of it first. And then, Rev, the other thing that we observed was that we asked some questions. I asked them how conflict was dealt with in their family, because as you said, even from Cain and Abel and those days, and various things in the Bible, we know that the conflicts are dealt with differently. And what we found that came out of this survey, which is just like our church, is that the majority of people said, boy, a lot of shouting took place, right? Okay, in the family. At the same time, you had some people saying that in their family, it was healthy dialogue. They just had conversations around issues. And so that's what came out of it. And no, an equal amount spoke about silence, where just didn't deal with it at all. or avoiding conflict. So those are smaller, but when you add them up, they almost come up to a third between silence and avoidance. Then we asked them who their most frequent conflicts were. It was an anonymous survey, so it's just the percentages we're working with. We didn't want to put anybody on the spot.
Right, good.
And naturally get more information that way. So what we found is that overwhelmingly, the most frequent conflicts that happened were with family members. I guess you know that thing about when we were living with each other, more like step on each other's toes and all of that kind of stuff. And then the next group, well, it was a wide group of other. We don't know exactly who comes under that other in detail, But even in that, apart from people at work, that's there, again, working together side by side, we know the issues. And people at church, that little orange one, yellowish one there, that's people at church. So yes, even over there, overseas, they have challenge at church too, just like us. We're not alone. And then what they found was that with family members now, the greatest conflict was with the spouse. Not surprising, we know about spousal conflict, intimate partner conflict and those things. So yes, 38% of those. And contrary to what people think, if you think that in-laws is a big thing, in-laws didn't really feature there at all, although they make all these jokes. After spouses came issues with children. So again, the parent-child relationship, and we're not surprised about that. Yes. And then the next one was divided between siblings and others, and those were the main thing. And of course, with parents. So children and parents, if we add those together, you would see. So parents with their children, children with their parents, big things, and siblings. And then now, the difference, sometimes people might have a clash often, but it's not as painful as a particular one. And the one that stood out in this particular survey was with mother, right? Apart from the other group, the mother, the conflict was with their mother was the most painful for some persons. And although we speak heavily in the Caribbean about the father wound, what we actually find is that when there's pain with mother, it's even more painful than father, so that came up. Another thing that came up, we asked them, how do they avoid conflict for those who avoid it? And these are some of the things they said, like they are silent, they try to please, the people pleasing thing and so on. Sometimes they leave, in Jamaica, we say, take for themselves, move away. Sometimes holding back or praying for grace. This was one of the responses that touched me, that prayer, I say, yes, as people of God, that was happy to hear that was there, Lots of people speak about silence. Some speak about thinking it through. And when I did the research on personalities, I saw how the personality thing came through. Yes. And the dialogue and withdrawals, and others verbalizing my concerns. Not many spoke about that, but yes, that was important. Confronting the person, debating, talking about it. And again, I saw the personality thing coming over when I did my little research on personalities, which I'll share with you right after. And they also spoke about having conversations, being direct and listening carefully. That also stood, being willing to listen. And then when we're speaking about the factors leading to conflict, and as they saw it, some of the things, far and above everything was communication breakdown. Closely behind it, personality differences and stubbornness came out. Disrespect. In Jamaica would say, you diss me, and we know that is from in the Bible days again. Do you remember with David when Nabal dissed him? Yes. And how it started a war, really, almost. Abigail had to intervene. So yes, disrespect is a big thing. Previous hurts. So sometimes what seems to come out is that the conflict was about things that had happened before, which pressed a button and hurt up a wound. Uncontrolled anger is another big one that came out, and unrealistic expectations. And we saw the others there, control issue, dishonesty, impatience, and so on. But the big ones were communication breakdown, personality differences, as we said, and stubbornness, disrespect, and then unrealistic expectations. These are some of the biggies there, and previous hurts. And then we asked people, what do they do when they are wrong? And the majority who said, when I'm wrong, I get defensive. The majority said, no, they don't get defensive at all. And so we were happy to hear that. We don't know in practice how it really works out, but that was the majority. And then when I was wrong, I take responsibility, 100% take responsibility. They're not like our church, because 100% don't take responsibility. But I'm happy to hear that church is really good that way. Good people there, man. And then no, the last one, I find it difficult to ask for forgiveness. 70% said no, they find it easy to ask for forgiveness. Only 30% said they find it difficult. And I find it difficult to forgive others. 60% said no, that means they find it easy to forgive. 40% though said it's difficult to forgive others. And I'm glad I'm not alone, because sometimes it's difficult to forgive, Rev, but God helps me, but it's not an easy thing at all. And so we really thank them for the participation, and we're very happy that they did so. And coming out of that, I, did the other part of the homework and would share with you some of the causes of conflict coming out of that.
Yes.
That stood out. And then I know that you also told me that you were going to tell me some as well.
Okay, let's hear them, Sister Sharon.
Right, Rev. So just give me 1 second here. But as we see here, right, I project that some of the causes of conflict that are personality differences, what I put as previous hurts, perception differences, and pressure. That one I put in there because it's still my belief. Stress. Sometimes we get into conflict just because we're under stress.
Yes.
So these personality differences, previous hurts, perception differences, and pressure. And so we speak a little bit about the personality differences, because that, in fact, is one that I'm so fascinated by. What I have learned is that people sometimes get into conflict according to their personality type. And if we would only just understand ourselves first and then understand the other person's personality, I think we could cut down conflicts in half.
Yes.
No, sometimes people speak about personalities like they have different ways of doing it, but all of them come from the same 4 basic styles, even the more complex Myers-Briggs and so on. But we just like to use the simple ones here. So we know, as you know, we have the choleric, the sanguine, the phlegmatic or melancholic. Mm-hmm. Or if we do the DISC version of that, that would be the DISC in that order, as you see on the screen. Or another group who do a taking flight with DISC speak about the eagle, the parrot, the dove, and the owl. And then this couple who have written the good fight, less and less a parrot, speak about the competitive fighter, collaborative fighter, conciliatory fighter, and the cautious fighter. We're going to speak a little about those. But I like to show you because you know that I am also DISC trained and taking flight trained. So the eagle, that is the assertive one who likes to go and really go for it, the go-getter, the no-nonsense one, the strong personality, the outspoken personality. And we'll see how that fits with the competitive fighter. The parrot tends to be the sociable one, chatty, socializer, and so on, motivated, inspirer. However, outgoing. So the eagle and the parrot we know are extroverts, and we'll see how those come out in the fight. Okay, but eagle is more task-oriented and the parrot is more people-oriented, and we'll see how that comes out in the fight. And then the dove, another people-oriented but introverted. Mm-hmm. And so this introvert who is people-oriented, we'll see how that makes them a conciliatory fighter. And then the owl, okay, also introverted but more task-oriented, and that's the cautious fighter. And so I want to just speak a little about how these fight types come, because when we understand the fight types, then, people understand their styles, it would really be very helpful.
Because what you're saying is that each of these personalities will deal with others differently, and once they know their personalities, it can improve the situations that create conflict. Absolutely.
Great. And so, for instance, the extroverted ones, the more outgoing ones, they tend to be
Yes.
more expressive when they are in a conflict. So that's like the competitive fighter and the collaborative fighter. And this is what they would be. They'd be more talkative, extroverted, bold, more emotional, jumping. You know, they might be more loud and outgoing, charismatic and optimistic because they are more expressive. Whereas the introverted ones, the dove and the owl, the conciliatory fighter and the cautious fighter, they tend to be less expressive, more reflective, think before they speak, you know, which is good, cautious, thoughtful, they take their time, they may be soft, inhibited, reserved, and seem more realist than optimist in their approach. You know, some might say pessimist, but we could see it otherwise. And then when it comes to flexibility versus less flexible, right? First to say that the expressive ones, that's these, the eagle and the parrot, they are comfortable sharing what is troubling them. They're going to talk about it. They're not going to walk away. They're not going to keep silent. They're going to put it out there. Right. They have different styles, though, depending on the eagle is going to be more blunt and not diplomatic in the way they say it. And they don't think much about the other feelings sometimes if they're going to the natural. The parrot, because they are people persons, they might be less blunt, you know, and so more tactful in the way they do it. So that's the expressiveness. But now the flexibility, this now is about how one is able to accommodate the feelings of others. And so the more flexible types, okay, those are the parrot and the dove. And they tend to be tender-hearted, the people ones. Tender-hearted, trusting, pleasant, easygoing, mild, can be indirect, accommodating, appeasing, and collaborative. Whereas the less flexible ones, they tend to be more tough-minded, reticent, factual, stick to the facts, let's get to it, decisive they can be, especially if they are the outgoing type, strong, direct, could be fault-finding, and provocative and cautious, especially when it comes to the old type. So I'm going to just share a little bit of what I came to learn about each of these fight styles. And at the same time, recognize that God is a God of variety. So God made all of us with the different personalities. And sometimes it's a combination, as we know. Yes. Yet, the thing about it that is so fascinating is with the power of the Holy Spirit, we can not only understand the strengths and weaknesses of our personality, but learn how to maximize our strengths and minimize our weaknesses. But we need to surrender to the Holy Spirit to be able to do so. So the competitive fighter or the eagle likes to win. They are more expressive, as I said, less flexible. They are goal-oriented and aggressive. So, you know, let's get these things done. They are direct and to the point, but sometimes can come across blunt and tactless. Yes. Tongue can sound a bit sharp, especially under stress. And that is one of the reasons that I wanted to speak about stress, because all of these personality types, when the person is under stress, and what more stress than this whole COVID time, then the strengths get pushed to weaknesses and we see the rough things. So then this eagle competitive fighter wants to get things out of the way, want to get it on the table and so on. However, because they don't struggle with being indecisive, they can even come across as a little prideful or arrogant in the way they do it. And so what they need to be mindful of is that they need to try to cooperate and have a win-win, not just try to bulldoze over the other person to get their way. So that's a competitive fighter. Whereas now the collaborative fighter, this one is a team player. That's like the parrot, okay? They're expressive and flexible. So the eagle was expressive, but not so flexible. But the parrot now, expressive and flexible. They listen well and love being listened to. So it's both, okay? Right? And so when they listen to, they feel loved. Yes. And at the same time, how they deal with it is because they don't want too much, in Jamaica, it's a cascas, too much conflict and quarrel. If it gets too hot, they will switch the conversation. It's not that they will go silent necessarily initially, but they will change the conversation because they don't like it to be too uncomfortable. because they want to stay clear of conflict. And that can be challenging though, because then they could bury their needs, hide what is they really want, and that can bring its own tension. On top of which, if it's really, really bad and they're under stress now, they could actually withdraw from the relationship and actually sulk and pull away. That's when it gets really bad for them. And so while they're good at conflict prevention, when they're skillful at it, sometimes they're also into conflict avoidance, which is a challenge, you know? And so what they need to do really is at the same time be able to make sure they understand. They might listen but not fully understand what the other person is going through in the conflict. So how do they listen and learn? But that's what I learned about the collaborative fighter, or the parrot as I call it. And then now the dove, or the conciliator, you know, peaceful as a dove, conciliatory fighter. This one is less expressive than the parrot, but they are highly flexible. They may even be more flexible than the parrot. So they like to be the peacemaker, okay? As a nice team player, quiet and so on. The challenge with this one is that they tend to keep their feelings hidden. And unless you ask them directly, they may not share what they're really feeling about things. They try to approach conversations being calm and serene and peaceful and all of that. And you have to kind of pull them out. However, even when it's a big controversy, they tend to speak slowly and deliberately. Now, you know, can you imagine them speaking with an impatient ego? The ego is fast and they want things quick and doesn't want to listen long. And they are listening to somebody who is speaking slowly and deliberately. You can imagine how that goes. So sometimes the dove doesn't get to share their feelings at all. And they don't like, you're not going to get them giving any outbursts usually. They're not the ones who are going to lash out in anger or anything like that. The challenge is they might keep it inside and build up resentment, which is a problem, bury it and all of that kind of stuff. So they need to be able to own their part of the conflict and share it patiently and kindly as they can, but not keep it inside. You know, an example is, for instance, could you imagine that if you gave your car to the mechanic and the mechanic discovered there was a routine service, they discovered something else, but they didn't want to tell you because they didn't want to upset you or to stress you. So they left you and your brakes weren't working well and you almost crashed. And then you said to the mechanic, you didn't know that? We didn't pick up that in the routine service? Say, yes, you know, but I didn't want to make you feel bad. So I never share it. Well, and I mean, that sounds so ridiculous. It sounds stupid, right? However, sometimes the dove can be like that because they don't want to make the partner feel uncomfortable. They sometimes might keep in things and avoid telling their partner the truth when the partner needs to hear it, or the other person with whom they are in a conflict, whether it's a work partner or somebody else. And then the last one, the cautious fighter, they tend to be thoughtful, the thinkers, and guarded. You know, where I am right now, you know, I hear a lot more. I don't know, I hope it's not disturbing you too much. You can hear me well still?
I can still hear you, Sister Sharon.
Yes. Okay. All right.
It's a little noisy, but I can still hear you.
Yes. As you say, this is the thing how people could fight with their neighbors. But anyway, that's how life is. It's a regular day. So thoughtful and guarded, the cautious fighter, the owl, right? They are less expressive and less flexible. So unlike the dove, who is more flexible, they are less expressive and less flexible. They are looking for the meaning, the hidden meaning behind the words. And they know, would question and sort of maybe get a little suspicious. Is this what the person really means? When they said that, is that what they meant? So it's all like trying to understand. And they now get into conflict because when they feel criticized or judged or so on, or they read something into the other person's motives, they are likely to get upset. And that may not be so, but it's because of the way they think and could overthink at sometimes. And on top of which now, they are the ones who are likely to write a long letter or a long email or a long note, sharing all of their grievances. That is the owl, the cautious fighter. They don't really enjoy fighting. However, when they do, they will be thinking and they'll keep calm and controlled, okay? The challenge is when they feel upset and criticized, they could actually show a bit of contempt or disrespect in the way they respond. So, you know, that was one of the things I learned about the personalities and the personality differences, Rev, and how those came up. And just to finish the other three little pieces quickly, perspective is another big thing that came out, how people see it. You know, you hear the expression, you give me a 6 for a 9. Well, there are other ways we can look at this. Can you imagine two people standing and looking at this number? One person is arguing that it is a 6, and the other person is arguing that it's a 9, you know? And this little cartoon I saw says, just because you are right does not mean I am wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side. And so quite often, some of the conflicts that we see, and I'm trying to get my counselees to understand that, is not that one is right and the other is wrong, but they're seeing it from different sides. Perspective is very important.
Yes.
And then pressure. The more I've been through this pandemic, I'm convinced that pressure, stress, and stress management is very important, because when we are stressed, it really, really acts on us. I know, you know, when I am stressed and my husband is stressed, the two of us, we're more likely to quarrel than when we're not. Over little things, you know, like primary school children, we will be quarreling over little things. But when we are not stressed, we are able to cope with those differences. So, you know, one of the things I've been sharing now with the counselees, now that I've really gone back over the whole thing about pressure, and it is just dealing with the 5 senses, because it's not a full stress management thing, but just that they could quickly deal with their own stress by every day, taking just a couple minutes, 5 minutes or so, and catering and nurturing themselves. Apart from the usual things, sleep and exercise and those things we know as stress management, is play to the side. In other words, put together 3 or so photos on their phone that they can look at, which will help them to, which are pleasant for them, whether it is faces or scenery or so on, and they can do that in a minute. Then hearing, they actually put on 2 little songs or collect their little stress management songs and a little playlist and play it when they're feeling stressed. And then dealing with the smell, they can have scented candles or body wash or something like that, which helps them to relax, as they, you know, they say vanilla and those scents, or even cinnamon, we know, and those things help with the sense of relaxation and so on. And then dealing with the taste, chocolate. They mustn't eat too much chocolate, though, you know, Reb, but they can eat a little piece of dark chocolate and so on, which does help with the stress management. And then a massage, but, you know, we're not necessarily going to a lot of people in this time with the COVID thing, but just massaging the earlobes can help them to manage their stress. And all of the stress management will help them to be able to better, when they manage their stress, deal with conflict. And if they want to shout, I have a little acronym for them that I give them to, you know. Instead of shouting, anytime they feel like shouting, change it to smile, S for smile, H for hug, O open, U up and talk. So anytime they think of shouting, instead, smile, hug, open up and talk. So Rev, those are the things that I have to share on what I've learned about dealing with the pressure, the personality, the perspective, and the problems. And I taught them a little song, but I will share that a little later.
Thank you very much, Sister Sharon. I am really, really encouraged and quite impressed by how you have been sharing with your counselees. And I'm sure that if they have been attentive to what you are saying, that it certainly will help them to deal with conflict in a more meaningful and a more appropriate way, so that they can get better results. I am so happy that you touched on the personalities, because it's important that we know the kind of personalities we have. And when we know our personalities, then we can know our reaction or our response in a particular situation. And it's important for others to know too what personalities they are dealing with, because we are all different people. And part of what creates conflict is that we want everybody to be like ourselves. And we just have to acknowledge that everybody is different. So when we would respond to something in one way and somebody else responds in another way, we don't have to take it personal. We just have to understand that, okay, that is their way. So it really calls for little restraint on our part, some empathy, some understanding, because this is absolutely important that we realize that persons are different and that persons respond and react differently. So thank you so much again for that. And I trust that we are going to continue the discussion on some of the causes of conflict. And I want to just share a couple other things with you, Sister Sharon, so that we can be on the same, we can be really, really helped. And this will also help you in your own counseling with others. Some of these you touched on, but I just want to emphasize them some more. And this is what I want to deal with in this way. Just let me just get this thing properly. Sorry about that. Stop share. Get to this. Slideshow. All right, so sometimes we right. So one of the things that came out of the survey is that communication, or weak communication, or poor communication is one of the causes of conflict. And I think it is important that we realize this, that sometimes we will find that people will react or respond to us based on how we initiate a conversation. And one of the most important part of weak communication that I have seen, and which was part of the survey you presented, that there's conflict among family members, among church members, and they noted communication breakdown as one of the problems. The heart of this is disrespect. I have seen when conflict arises is where people feel disrespected. And how are the ways we show disrespect? We show disrespect when we talk down to someone. So within a couple, a spouse may talk to his or her, a husband may talk to his wife in a way that the wife feels disrespected by what the husband says, or the husband may feel disrespected by what the wife says. So sometimes disrespect, they do not feel that the other person may feel taken for granted, or they may feel that their partner is talking down to them. And sometimes children in the family may feel that their parents are talking down to them and are not speaking to them. They may feel that they are speaking over their heads. They feel embarrassed if their parents speak to them in the presence of other people. Like sometimes they are at church and they want to say something to them. And instead of calling the child aside and say, whisper to them and say, you must not do that, or go and do so and so. They just yell at them. Don't you see big people around? Don't you know you must say excuse? And when you shout at persons like that, they are going to react. And they may feel ashamed and feel resentful. And that creates hurt. And if they get an opportunity, they are going to respond in a way that they feel that they can save face. So disrespect is something that should be avoided. Disrespect is shown in not acknowledging the other person as a person in their own right, or as I mentioned, shouting at someone when this shouldn't be the case. The other way is where we criticize, is criticism, where we criticize someone not on the basis of what they do, but sometimes we criticize their character. We put them down in terms of, you are such a disgusting person. You are such a lazy person. So we are attacking who they are as a person. We sometimes say you are someone who can't even behave properly in public. So we may not identify the behavior which they are capable of changing and which everybody can do and can manage and control. We criticize the essence of who they are. And when we do that, it weakens people's self-esteem. And couples do it to each other, because one of the things that came out in the survey that you shared, again reinforced here, that this happens in relationships. And people, after a while, can go through a marriage, go through a relationship, and they basically just endure because they feel that they are not seen as worth anything by their spouse. They are just seen as being taken for granted and treated as nothing. Sometimes we blame other persons. It is you who caused this to happen. Imagine I loaned you my car and you didn't put gas in the car, and now it's weekend and I want to go somewhere and you just drive the car and don't put any gas in it. And sometimes we blame. And another time we accuse. We accuse somebody of doing something wrong. You may put down something and you forget where you put it. Why you take up what me put down? Look how me put down the phone here, so, or me put down this here, and you take it up, and it has nothing to do with the other person. And sometimes this happens in church as well. People blame other persons for they are the ones who may have caused a particular program to not happen, or they may be accused of saying something that was inappropriate or something critical to someone, and that person decided not to come back to church. So there are all those kinds of criticism. There is contempt. It is where you begin to show that you don't even think that this person is worthy. You don't even think that they are of any value or of any worth. You know, you just look down on them. I remember somebody saying to me once, a lady said that her husband said to her that you sick my stomach. I felt so much pain when that lady said that to me, that this is what her husband told her. And sometimes there are people who behave in that way towards their partner. They might not use the words, but their body language, their facial expressions, their mannerism, the way they approach their partner, the way they approach their young adults or their teenagers within the family, communicates contempt to those persons, that I really don't want you around, but I'm not saying it in so many words. I think you are a burden to me, but I'm not saying it in so many words. Just the very attitude, the very mannerism. And these can create conflict in families. Labeling is another thing. So sometimes we call people names. We, instead of really appreciating somebody again, we call them worthless, we call them wicked, we call them evil, we call them good for nothing. And when we do these name calling, can you imagine when some of these names stick with persons and with children and youngsters? And that is why youngsters sometimes leave homes and don't come back. Some of them even commit suicide because they don't feel that they are loved by their parents. And it is difficult. I know mothers have a lot of pressure on them, and sometimes single mothers. And when you have children and you have to raise them alone, it's very difficult unless you can manage all of your stresses. Sometimes the negative stresses come out in your communication to your children. And that is why part of the conflict is where persons said that it is sometimes related to their mothers. It's most painful because it is that relationship is a primary relationship. Youngsters love their mothers, they respect them, they appreciate them, but sometimes they get the most hurtful things from their mothers. And sometimes the mothers say things not because they want to hurt them. They say things because they want to shame them into behaving better. They want to shame them into improving their behavior. But sometimes the shame method does not do what they intend it to do. And it is internalized by the child or internalized by the other person. And when people internalize shame, they go through life feeling that they are less than, feeling that they are deficient in a particular area. And when somebody feels that they are deficient, it affects how they relate in relationship. If someone comes to them and wants to have a relationship with them and maybe a decent, upstanding person, they may say, no, I'm not worthy for you. And all things like that. So it creates a multitude of conflicts in relationship. And so parents should avoid name calling and labeling.
So true.
Then there is the magnification. It is where persons take the position that there are some things which is where you blow the other person's faults way out of proportion and think that the important and shrink the importance of the person's positive qualities. So during an argument, you may blurt out, I can't believe how stupid you are. And the person has done a lot of good things. But just one thing, they go to the supermarket and forget to pick up an item or pick up the item and leave it there in the supermarket. And you come over and just say, I can't believe how stupid you are. You know, it's the same kind of thing that that was said of Nathanael, can any good come out of Nazareth? Where they said to Jesus, when Jesus asked where they came from. It's as if there are some good things about the persons, but you don't feel that, you just magnify one little fault they have, and you just see them as being totally bad. It is also where you end up with some should statements. It's like you criticize yourself and other people with shoulds or shouldn'ts or oughts and must and have tos. And they are common, and these are common patterns. In other words, there are other directed shoulds that person have. You tell yourself that other people shouldn't feel and act the way they do, and that they should be the way you expect them to be. So how are you going to expect people to cooperate with you and not be in conflicting situations when you are insisting that they should behave the way you do? Sure. And what happens when you, as a parent or as an adult, begin to compare your children with other children? Look at the Gordon's children. Look how the boy behaves so well. Look how he sits down in Sunday school. He doesn't even look on his phone when he's at church. But look at you. Your head down on your phone and you don't even lift it up. And so you're comparing the children and telling them that they are to be like that. So these are some things that you need to bear in mind in terms of the shoulding, the should statements, which can really create problems. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, and I hope we have time for this, Sister Sharon, just want to say one other little area which came out of the survey is unrealistic expectations. And one of the things I have found in dealing with couples over the years in relationship is that one of the really burdensome experience is where couples do not state or do not clarify to each other, for each other, what is expected of the other. So they operate as if they know what the other person wants. And so when the expectations are not met, they blame the other person and they withdraw emotionally from the other person, because what they do, they enter what we call mind reading, sometimes of the other and of themselves. So they read the mind of their partner and think that their partner is thinking this or is doing this, and they don't ask them what they're thinking or what they want. They just read their mind and say, okay, let me give you this because this is what you want. Or sometimes they read their mind and begin to behave in a defensive way in what they think their partner is thinking. So they think that their partner is going to quarrel with them about something, and they start behaving a defensive way to their partner, and their partner wonders, why are they behaving like that? Because they didn't say anything or they didn't do anything. You know, that is why the proverb said the wicked man flee when no man pursueth. So they start to behave as if something is happening and nothing like that. And so they not only read the mind of their partner, but sometimes they read their own minds. In other words, and it's important, you can read your own mind, but that you are thinking that the other person is reading your mind. You think that the other person is reading your mind to think that, I wonder what the other person is thinking. And that can create conflict. So you get into the mind reading thing where you are reading the mind of others. And then you also think that the other person is reading your mind. One of the ways we have said, and we're going to look at cures to conflict, but one of the ways that we deal with unrealistic expectation is not to think that you can read the mind of the others. Ask specific questions. Ask for what you want. Be intentional in your expectations. Where something is not going according to expectation, don't make assumption. Say to your partner or say to your children, this is what I thought would happen, but this is not what is happening. Can you explain why this is so? Or where is it that we went wrong? You have to develop the approach where if you observe something that the other person is doing that is not what you expect, don't accuse the person. Don't live in worry and anxiety, and don't stress yourself. Just ask your partner. And don't sit down and say you can't ask him, because if you ask him, it's going to be a fuss. Or if you ask her, it's going to be a fight. No, it's better to confront the situation, have some clarification, than you live in resentment and you hurt inside. And when you do not talk about conflict, you will act it out. And when you act it out, it comes out in more destructive ways. So it is always better to put the thoughts on the table so that both of you can be in an understanding position. So don't develop expectations without discussion. And some people in a relationship, they have expectations about if it's a parent and a child, if it's a church member and another member, it's what the other member is going to do in the group. So everybody expects that the other member is going to write the minutes, the other member is going to make the notices, and the other member is going to tell everybody else, but yet they don't ask them to do it. Don't assume that. You sometimes plan a meeting and you expect everybody to turn up. Don't think that everybody is just going to listen to the notices. You have to be able, if you expect people to turn up, don't quarrel with them when they don't turn up. You have to make a special effort to say, we are having a particular meeting and we are inviting you to be present. Tell them what time it is so that they can put it in their schedules. Because if you don't tell them that, and then they don't turn up, and you quarrel with them, and you expect them to come for the next meeting, no. You have to be able to tell them before. Clarify the expectations as you go along. Because if the expectations are not clarified, it is going to create conflict. Conflict within groups within the church, conflict within families in terms of what is to be done, and conflict with relationships. So you have to be able to monitor those very carefully in how you deal with those particular matters. So I would say, while we deal with these particular issues, that we are mindful of how we deal with, as I said, these are so important because they came out of the survey as part of the sources of conflict. So what I'm going to do, Sister Sharon, I think at this point we could take a break, and then when we come back, we will go into some of the consequences, and then I'll hear from you what are some of the other things that you have been experiencing with your counselees.
That's a good idea, Webb. Just before the break, I'd promised them that I'd share the song, and then I'll put a couple songs after. So I will, if you permit me to share screen, I'll just show them the little song, show you the little song that I was going to share, that I taught them when I met with a group. And then sorry, just one little thing before you before we're going to take the break, but before you I'll share that.
if there's anything so far that we need clarification on, or any questions that anyone wants to raise, we are looking for the questions in the chat. So we want you to put the questions in the chat so we can deal with them, and it's easier for us to prepare that way. But if there's anything that is pressing that you need to raise, just raise it now or put it in the chat. If not, we're going to go straight into the song and then the break. Okay.
So we know the song. Some of us know the song, and you can show by a raise a hand if you know the song. Press along, saints. Press along. All right, an old time song. So this one is called Get Along, Saints. A little jingle I wrote to the same tune as Press Along. And I asked somebody who Reverend Cecil would know very well, because I'm not a big time singer, but this person can sing. So I'm going to put it here and hopefully you can hear it because I have noise around. So you'll hear them singing it. And you can, when you catch the rhythm, can sing along with your mics muted. Unfortunately, with this thing, you know, when we sing with our mics open, it begins to sound chaotic. But here we go. Get along, saints, get along, don't fight each day. Get along, saints, get along, forgive and pray. When hate and anger you bear, joy and peace will disappear. Give thanks to God and you have liberty. Oh, get along, saints, get along, don't fight each day. Oh, get along, saints, get along, forgive and pray. When hate and anger you bear, joy and peace will disappear. Give thanks to God and you have liberty. Get along, saints, get along, don't fight each day. Oh, get along, saints, get along, forgive and pray. When hate and anger you bear, joy and peace will disappear. Give thanks to God and you have liberty. Oh, when hate and anger you bear, joy and peace will disappear. Give thanks to God and you have liberty. When hate and anger you bear, joy and peace will disappear. Give thanks to God and you have liberty. Give thanks to God and you have liberty. Give unto God and you have liberty. That was the voice of one Annalie Gray Brown. Sending you a little sunshine from Jamaica, Calvary. I hope you enjoyed that song. And he told us again, don't fuss and fight. And so as we continue, we will be going back into our sharing, and we've looked at so far at the concept of conflict causes and some characteristics like personality and previous hurts, and communication and unrealistic expectations. We've looked at, we're at the break, we took our break, and now we're going into consequences, which can be divided into positive and negative. And so, Rev, as you sent me to look, back with you, Rev, and so as we sent me to check out these, I've learned, you know, that one doesn't have to be afraid of conflict and overwhelmed by it, as I was feeling. And these sessions we have been doing together, these supervision sessions, have really helped me a lot to have a different perspective on it. And in fact, you know, I even did some more research, and I found this wonderful little book called The Good Fight too, by these counselors, Les and Leslie Parrott. And they really have shared that you can have a good fight, even couples and other people. And that some of the differences that came up, you know, between a bad fight and a good fight and so on have helped me to think of it in a positive way. So the goal, for instance, of a bad fight is winning the fight. But in a good fight, it is resolving the fight.
Okay.
When it is a good fight, we deal with the underlying issues. But in a bad fight, they just stick at surface issues. And then when it is a bad fight, it's about power struggle and personalities more than anything else, overwhelming the situation. But in a good fight, focus on the ideas and the issues. And I'm not to talk about the attitude. Attitude is very different between a good fight and a bad fight. Attitude is confrontational and defensive when it's a bad fight, but it's cooperative and receptive when it's a good fight. What about the motivation? When it's a good fight, people want to take responsibility for their part. You know, even that, as you know, this divorce recovery support group that has been run for over 20 odd years called Fresh Start, one of the things that has always been told to people is take responsibility for your part in the breakdown of the relationship. So in a good fight, people take responsibility and they do that. In a bad fight, is always blaming. Some people call it blame throwing, you know, like how you have flame throwing. And then the mode, in a good fight, there's respect. In a bad fight, belittle, put down, as you were talking about it a while ago. In a good fight, there's a lot of empathy, trying to understand the other person. In a bad fight, it's a lot about ego. Me, beat my chest. It's all about me kind of thing. And also, in a bad fight, people get self-righteous. There's a difference between righteous and self-righteous, you know. And so self-righteous doesn't work, right? That's a recipe for a bad fight. But in a good fight, there's understanding. In a good fight, yeah, the tension will go down over time. But in a bad fight, it's going to go up. And then in a good fight, there will be harmony as a result. And in a bad fight, discord. And ultimately, in a good fight, there will be growth and intimacy. And in a bad fight, stagnation and defiance. So now, what came out of this for me was this whole thing about rules for a good fight. And I tried to share with them how to have some rules for a good fight. Because instead of fearing fights, we need to recognize we can understand each other. So I've shared with the group that I was called to share with, and pulling on even this good fight thing, using the acronym CORE, cooperation, ownership, respect, and empathy, as that was suggested by Les and Leslie Parrott, which I like that acronym. Basically, when people are having a good fight, they really should seek to build cooperation. So it is possible in conflict, coming out of conflict, for there to be better cooperation, you know? And then ownership, taking owning your side, owning your part in the breakdown of the relationship. Taking ownership is very important. And that is another thing that is characteristic and setting up a rule for a good fight. And, you know, one of the things that I gave them as homework, you know, is that anybody, parent and child, or husband and wife, or church member and other church member, write out what are your rules for a good fight. And so that you have it. Just like, you know, even those, you know, when you say boxing and all of those things, they still have rules. And you're not to hit below the belt and those kind of things. So you need to have these rules. So taking ownership, and then respect. Back to that thing about contempt you were talking about, and belittling and so on. In a good fight, there's always respect. In Jamaica, we say maximum respect in every aspect. You know, we need to have that kind of respect that is there, and showing it, enough respect. And always, so it's possible. And you know, one of the things I always told my children, you know, they could tell me anything they want, but always with respect. And I think if some parents were able to do that with their children, they could in fact diffuse some of the tensions. When the parents could say, when the child could say to the parent, you know, Mommy, I felt bad when you shouted at me in front of my friends, or Daddy, you did X, Y, or Z, you know, but with respect. So yes, respect. And same thing with an employer and an employee, or a leader and a follower. Respect is very important. So if we have the rules that we're going to discuss things in a respectful manner, and then empathy. putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, trying to see how that would play out.
Yes.
And so these are some of the rules for a good fight, which would help us to be able to fight fairly and could make a fight have a positive, not really a fight in terms of fist fight, but really a conflict can have positive consequences if these rules are applied, because coming out of it, there are some things that would come out, better understanding are some of the things that would come out. People would build greater teamwork that can come out of this conflict, you know. Another thing that can come out of it is we can really share our true self. So there's no resentment building up under the surface because we're just trying to keep the peace at any price. And we know what happens when people try to keep peace at any price. Eventually something has to give. And sometimes you wonder, that nice young boy that we saw over there, the neighbor, he could have really do, you know, some of those shootings we hear and all of those things. Sometimes sometimes it's a resentment that is gone bad over time. So basically, these are some of the things. And the empathy and putting ourselves in each other's shoes too can also be, how can I see it? Back to that perspective, the 6 and the 9 from another person's point of view, the other side of things. It doesn't have to be, I'm wrong and you are right, you know? So we keep it real, we are authentic. We clarify, we're able to get to the real issues when it's positive, okay? We also can clear the air so that not a lot of stuff builds up over time, you know? And then actually people can get closer together when they have resolved that conflict than before. So people shouldn't fear the conflict just as long as they're practicing and playing by the rules. So those are some of the things I wanted to encourage the people about. And so coming out of that, the rules in terms of that same core now that we spoke about, just to remind you what I told them, cooperation, ownership, respect, and empathy.
Yes.
Breaking some of these rules for a good fight. On the cooperation, share withholds, positive or negative. What does that mean? You know, sometimes we think of something positive about somebody, but because life is so fast, you know, so parents think, my child is not such a bad child, you know, or my child is really disciplined this way. Some compliment you could pose, or, you know, pastor is a good leader, you know, and really and truly under this COVID time, pastors come up with good ideas. We think the thought, but we don't say it to the person, okay? Sometimes maybe the time might not be right, rushing, maybe even after church you want to say something to somebody, but rushing out and you didn't get to say it. We can make the time, or even to our neighbors, they do something kind just to express that. So practice sharing that positive thought that we have about the person, that we kept to ourselves, not because we meant to be mean, but just time, rushing and all of that. Write it down and make a note, a point to share it. That is one withhold. We have negative withholds as well. And when we're in close relationship with family members, we might think the person did something which hurt our feelings or upset us in some way. But again, maybe the timing of when to say it didn't come up right then. Yeah. Again, not because we went to keep it in, but again, we didn't get to do so. So for instance, it could be that a family is having dinner together or friends are over and somebody says something that hurts the other family member's feelings. But at that time, or a child is disrespectful in front of the visitors, instead of, or at church, as you spoke about, the child did something, instead of shouting them down in that particular setting, wait till a private time and share it. So that's a negative withhold. Now, if we practice collecting the positive more than the negative, we can share both with an agreement that when we are sharing it, we're not going to jump on the negative and respond immediately. It's just sharing, and when the person says, I want to share this with you, you share some positives, you share the negative, and all you do is say, thank you for sharing that. If you need to get back to it to defend it or to clarify, you agree that that's not when you're going to do it. You give it some space, at least 20 minutes, half hour, before you get back. Another one, draw for the conflict card, and I'm going to show a little bit of what that is. And the other one is to recognize in cooperation that sometimes you have to agree to disagree agreeably, meaning that not every conflict is going to be solved. You know, pastor might have a view of how church members should do something. Church members might have a view of how pastor should do something. They may differ on it, but it's not a principle difference. It's a difference of style. In a situation like that, it's not contradicting what the Bible says or anything. Then we have to agree to disagree agreeably. And that is one of the things that can be done. So these are some of the cooperation rules for a good fight. And then now, this is the conflict card. It applies like to couples. There are 10 points, because sometimes some people find that they don't know how to express their feelings, whereas some people, remember we said some are more expressive than others. Right. So the more expressive ones are going to probably shout or share strongly. Think about this, but the quieter one might not do so. So one of the ways the conflict card can be used is that the first one is one, a level one conflict. You would say, I'm not enthusiastic. So say a couple is trying to make a decision, and one can say, I'm not enthusiastic, but it's no big deal to me. If it's really not a big deal, that's just a level one thing. So the other person, you say, go ahead, you know? Or I don't see it that way, but I could be wrong. That's a level 2 now. Or 3, I don't agree, but I could live with it. Or the next one, I don't agree, but I'll let you have your way. That's 4. You notice it's getting a little bit more, you know, a little higher. The next one, I don't agree and I cannot remain silent. This is now where it has reached a stage where you have to say something about it, okay? And so this is saying, for even the quieter person, this is ramping up in terms of how things are for me. And then the next 5 gets heavy now. And think about couples. I do not approve. I need more time. So this could be a major decision a couple is trying to discuss, for instance. And they say, no, I do not approve. I need more time. And so it gives the people words that they could say, or I strongly disapprove and I cannot go along with this. That's the next level, right? That is level 6, 7. Yes. Then 8, I would be so seriously upset, I cannot predict my reaction. Okay, so without shouting, it helps people to be able to articulate where they are. And then in a couple there, if it reaches level 9 now, no possible way. If you do, I quit. In other words, by this time, if a couple is reaching this conflict on an issue, it means you need to get counseling from you reaching these heavy ones now, right? If you're saying over my dead body, you're not saying kill me, but basically what you're saying is that this one is a no deal for me. This is a deal breaker. This is not so. And this is how strongly I feel about it. So you could see that by just using this, people are able to communicate and share how seriously they feel about something without shouting, without name calling, without cursing any bad words or anything like that. You can just, and without making up the face in any way or rolling their eyes in contempt. So these are some of the ways. So those were the cooperation rules. Then the ownership rules, apologize when you mean it, because for us to connect and fight fairly, we need to be able to apologize when we mean it. Basically, it's about taking responsibility. I take responsibility. You know, I said that I shouldn't have said it. You know, I regret doing that. And we must genuinely regret it. Okay. And then, you know, I won't do it again and whatever. Something that shows that we want, how can I make this situation better? Very important to do so. And in that too, also in ownership, I would also suggest another one, which is also being able to be vulnerable with the other person when we are willing to have a good fight, which is coming into the XYZ formula in our XYZ, as you'd say in North America, formula in many ways. But being vulnerable, give you an example. So in January, I had COVID. Just at home, my husband had to be out of the room. And so what did I have to do? Basically, you know, I started to feel lonely. And that was a natural practice. That was the right way to deal with it and all of that. But I was feeling lonely. I was tempted, Rev, to say to him, don't get too comfortable out of the room, and all of that. Now, fortunately, as I remember all the coaching you have given me, Rev, I thought about it and said, that is not the way to say it. Instead, just said to him, I miss you. And when I said, I miss you, he said, I miss you too. We had to communicate on Zoom during the time. He said, I miss you too. Now, a fight could have started if instead of owning my feelings, I put it on him, like, don't get too comfortable out of the room. That is picking a fight. But the real problem was just being vulnerable enough to say, I miss you. So these are some of the things. And another way to own it is to practice the XYZ formula. In situation X, when you do X, I feel Y, what I would like is Z or Z. And so therefore, when you come home late without calling, I feel anxious. Parent can say that to the child too as well, or a spouse to the other. What I would like is for you to call and let me know if you are running late. Things like that, rather than how you so inconsiderate, or think about nobody feeling but yourself, how you so selfish. These are some of the ways in which sometimes we attack instead of sharing from using these I statements. When you do this, I feel this, what I would like is. So these are ways, of course, to have the good fight, to keep it proper and for it to have a positive outcome. And then respect. Then the respect rules are just a couple. Don't be cruel, avoid contempt. That same rolling of the eyes, we can't say it enough. John Gottman is famous for doing some research on principles for making marriage work. And he has studied couples for over 30 years. And one of the biggest predictors of divorce was the ongoing contempt in a relationship where people put each other down, rolled eyes, and all of those things. So there are different ways in which people can be cruel and avoid contempt. The old story that is told, old story about a husband and wife who were fighting. And I'm sure many of the people, many others have heard this story. And they decided they weren't talking to each other. And so basically, as a result, the husband now had to take a trip the next day, a business trip. And so he decided he's not breaking the malice too, So he wrote a note to his wife, please wake me up at 5 o'clock because he has to catch a flight, When he woke up the next morning, it was 9 o'clock. And he's vexed now because his wife, she's so mean, she don't even call me because we're in a quarrel. But when he looked and he was about to confront her, on his pillow, he saw a note, it's 5 o'clock, please wake up. So basically, that is mean, no. Both of them were still being mean to each other. And that is a subtle form of contempt. It is used as an old-time story, but that is one way of being mean to each other. And we can be cruel. So good fights, we're not cruel. And then another thing that was found, and this also came out in the Gottman research, was take a time out if needed. Basically, so when we're in conflict, sometimes the conflict is so heavy that we begin to feel a flooding of emotions, and men even more than women, and you can feel it. The chest is tightening, your body starts to sweat, you feel overwhelmed, you feel like you can't think clearly, a rush of thoughts, all these things happen. That is time to use the coaching sign, time out, and to be able to say, I need a break. And that time out needs to be for at least 20 minutes because studies have shown in that research that it takes time to come back down to normal. So these are some of the ways in which a conflict can happen, and it's positive. And so some of the ways that the timeout will be productive is one, if you agree on a time to resume the discussion. It's not that it's an indefinite timeout because people want to get the thing solved. So you agree on a specific time. Okay, we're going to take a timeout. I need a timeout. And if you need it, you request it when you need it. And you promise that you're going to solve it later. And when is that? And when I do premarital, I do encourage couples, make the rules, and so we will resolve this. The thing about don't let the sun go down when you're angry. Sometimes, though, the truth of the matter is when people are tired late at night, it's not the best time to resolve something. So sometimes they may need to say, can we continue this discussion tomorrow or on Saturday morning if it's a heavy week, and we'll make some time for it. Move away to calm down. And in the break though, don't ruminate over it. In other words, don't keep on thinking, oh, he could say that to me. Oh, she could do that to me. And it just processing the thing over and over in the head. That's not going to solve it. That's not a good timeout. Timeout is now you do something else. Even some of those techniques that I told, listen to music, do your stress management, do a little exercise, other things that are pleasant to bring down the pressure at that time. And then you can go back to discussion and then indicate when possible how soon you'll be ready. So that's a productive timeout. And the final one in empathy, we said don't do mind reading in the way you were talking about it, but read their mind and guess the thoughts and feelings. What that means is really just sort of kind of play a little game. Can I read your mind? And you could say, you know, Reverend Cecil, when you said from the pulpit that all members should do this, were you trying to suggest that so? And then Reverend Cecil said, no, sir, that wasn't in my mind at all. What I was trying to say was, I heard about this situation in Ukraine and it made me think of X. But somebody is there thinking I'm talking about something in Queens. Had nothing to do with that at all. So we can ask, and for clarification, was that what you were thinking? Was that how you felt? Because some conflict comes because of that misunderstanding. And then the big one, and it came out in the survey that somebody put, pray for the other person. Yes. Because when we are able to pray for the other person, then even that person with whom we may be having a conflict, if we can seriously put that to God in prayer and recognize that there, but for the grace of God, go I. It is also much easier to have a good fight and for the conflict to have a positive outcome, as we said, of mutual understanding, deepening the relationship, solving the problem, or agreeing to disagree agreeably. So those are some of the positive consequences that I have learned. They're not all,
Yes.
and some of the ways that we can have a fair fight and how that would work itself out. And so, Rev, I don't know what you think about all of that, and if you have anything to, share and tell me about it. But that's what came out of that.
Yeah, I think that is very good, very positive. And it is clear that once you use those approaches, you can help persons to see that there are positive approaches that can be incorporated in handling conflict. One of the critical things that has stood out in what you have said is the whole matter of taking responsibility for one's behavior in a conflict. It is not blaming the other. It is not accusing the other. It is not being contemptuous of the other, but it is recognizing that in any conflict, it involves two people. Yes. And that is always something that we have to bear in mind and never ever think that when a conflict arises, it is only one person who is guilty all the time, and that is not the case. I want to share with you a little more, Sister Sharon, from some of the other perspective, some of the negative consequences of conflict. But I want to just note what I've been saying by making the observation that conflict is a problem when a couple of things happen. For some people, they may not think it is a problem, but it is a problem when some things happen. It is a problem when it hampers productivity and progress. Within your church, if you find that members, because of a drawn out conflict in the congregation, sometimes the conflict could be between groups, between people who don't like the approach the pastor is taking, people don't like how the choir is operating, or the choir feel that they need to do one thing and the pastor don't think that is the approach they should take, that they should sing particular songs and the choir feel that they should do that. So after a while, there's a big conflict there, and that can create problems. So,
oh, yes.
So what you may find the choir does, they come late, they drag the song, they don't turn up for rehearsal, they do things to sabotage the process because they don't agree with the pastor's position or the choir director's position. And the choir director may come to the pastor and explain how frustrated he is because he's not getting the cooperation from the choir. The thing with church is that you can't just fire people like you would in a private sector, because everybody is a friend of the boss. Within the church, everybody is a friend of the boss. And it is not all the time they listen to the boss, who is God. Okay? But everybody is a friend of the boss. So they all feel like they have a place there. And so you have to be that in mind, because it's very difficult to lead a church. But conflict, if it is not managed, becomes a problem when there's no progress. One group start to argue against the other group and so on, and you have that within the church. The other thing is where morale is lowered, where people who used to be active and involved, all of a sudden they come to church, but some of the argument is about, I wonder which church they're going to switch to now because they don't know if they can continue this. So morale is very low. They don't feel enthusiastic again. They don't feel very eager to do things. And so some of these are some of the negative consequences. Causes more and continued conflicts. So whereas people would have overlooked certain differences that people have or that other members have, everything becomes a fight because of the underlying unresolved conflict. Okay, so because these bigger conflicts have not been addressed, have not been managed, they create others. And this happens in the family. It happens between husbands and wife. If there is a conflict that they have not managed, they have not resolved, then all of a sudden, other things become problematic. Simple issues that they would have talked about, that they would laugh about, that they would understand each other over, now become sources of conflict because everything is seen against that unresolved state. So there's a state of tension, which creates a level of dis-ease in the relationship. The children will notice the tension, and unless something happens, they feel isolated, they withdraw, and they perhaps sometimes not necessarily take sides because they want to see harmony between their parents. If the conflict is between them, the same thing happens. They flare up at something. And sometimes somebody may think that they are the cause of the conflict, but they are not the cause. It is because something else is on the line or something else is below. Then causes conflict is a problem when it causes inappropriate behavior. And inappropriate behavior when people start shouting at others. When younger members start shouting at other adults. When people get an opportunity to use a pulpit, maybe to share a testimony, and they start to use it to talk people's business, and they get a chance to share in Sunday school, and they start to tell everybody, you know, so and so. They might not call any names, but based on how they describe the story, everybody know what the problem is. And that is inappropriate behavior. And sometimes it is expressed in unhealthy or dysfunctional relationships between groups, between individuals. A conflict may arise with a couple, and all of a sudden there's a pulling away, and one person behaves in inappropriate way to other persons or respond to overtures from other persons within the church. So you have to bear this in mind as some of the ways in which conflicts manifest themselves. Then, of course, some of the negative elements of conflict is when the conflict is unresolved, as I have said so far, is that there are ways in which people begin to internalize the attitude of others or internalize what they think people are saying. So people will say, they don't like me, or it's because I'm different, or it is because I don't live in that area, or I don't come from that community, or I didn't go to that school. In other words, where there is conflicts, people personalize it. So it's a negative side of conflict, and it is personalized in a way to lead to negative behavior on the part of the person who feels that they are in a conflictual situation. Sometimes there is triangulation. And what triangulation is where the person who is a party to conflict, which has not been resolved, go and tell Tom that, you know what so-and-so do. And then Tom tells Mary, you hear what me hear about so-and-so, about A and B. And then somebody tells Summer, and then somebody else tells me. And then you go through the whole year, and there is multiplication of this conflict. So it is triangulation where other people who have absolutely nothing to do with a misunderstanding between two members or a misunderstanding between a group decide that they get involved. And when they get involved, they are not going to the people who are at the heart of the conflict. They are talking around each other about those persons. And so those persons now are at the center of a storm that is going to blow up. And then person will come to pastor, and sometimes pastor may be the last one to know what is happening. Or depending on pastor, because each pastor is a person with a personality and may approach the conflict in particular ways. So that is also something. So when the conflict is there and it is left unresolved, untreated, and unattended, it becomes a festering sore or cancer, which can seriously undermine the health, the emotional and spiritual health of the church. So it is absolutely necessary that that's seen as a negative consequence of conflict. The other thing, when the conflict is unrelenting, it goes on and on and on. That can be problematic. It's like a war that doesn't seem to have any end. It's like the Vietnam War that for years nobody won, but there are many casualties from that war. It is perhaps the war between Russia and Ukraine. There, it's going. If it's unrelenting and nobody can see a point, or they cannot arrive at a solution, which we are going to look at later. We talk a little more, Sister Sharon, when we talk more as to how we can cure or how we can respond. You know, we'll talk a little more about that. But unrelenting conflict, it takes up time. It takes up energy. It consumes energy. Can you imagine if you're a leader in a church, every time you sit down to do something, the conflict spinning around in your head, and you want to move and you can't move because that conflict is there. If you are in your family, whenever you want to deal with a particular issue, if you sit at the table, you remember that your son said something or your son did something. So it is spinning around in your head. Or you and your spouse complained about something. So it becomes an issue that is always there. And unless you devise a way to address it, it's going to continue. Then we deal with the whole matter of escalation, because sometimes a conflict can start very simple, very mild, and it can move from a situation where it is very light to very heavy. And usually where the one person, disputant one or disputant two, or the person who has a conflict on one side, may make attempts to reach over and, you know, gain the influence and gain the cooperation of the other person. And the other person might not feel comfortable about responding. May just say, boy, I'm not ready to make any peace yet. Okay,
True.
right? Those people not ready to make no peace yet. Me not ready to smile with you. Me not ready to shake no hand, because they feel that whatever was said was very hurtful, was very painful, and there is no eagerness. And again, we're going to look at how we deal with that from a biblical point of view as well. But the whole thing is that the escalation can move from very light until it gets very heavy. It can move from small till it gets larger. There's a tendency for the conflict to proliferate. So it moves from one person and you bring in other people, you bring in other areas of the church, you bring in a whole lot of situations that have no place in that conflict. And everybody becomes absorbed in a particular struggle. So families become absorbed. The women's group become absorbed. The men's group become absorbed. The choir becomes absorbed. And so everybody becomes absorbed. If it is a family issue, whether it is over dead left, everybody, the neighbors, children, and then in-laws, and then everybody get involved in that conflict. Sometimes the conflict can move from very general, it can escalate from specific to general. And what happens is that it affects the overall relationship between the participants. This deteriorates because something which was very, very specific, which was very, very simple, such as somebody may have made a comment which was not received properly by the other person, is seen as a very general comment. That them say, me thief the church money. It may just be that the church had a function and not all the returns were brought in. And this particular person, who maybe it was a harvest and they sold some things for the church, didn't bring in all the money on time, and people start to accuse them of saying that they thief the church's money. And they sold the tickets and they probably can't afford account for all the returns from the tickets, or they didn't sell all the tickets and they can't account for the ones that they did not sell. So somebody said, well, you have to pay for it. But the person said, well, it wasn't sold, so I can't pay for it, it's just that I can't find it. And a lot of times that creates conflict in a church. So maybe a specific comment or a specific situation may lead to very, very conflicting situation with everybody. The other thing is that sometimes you all see a situation escalates when it moves from a person is doing well to a situation where they are winning, or it sometimes leads to hurting the other. And in those situations where other people are hurt, it really, really requires some kind of intervention. I did observe that while you were sharing, Sister Sharon, somebody had made the observation that sometimes you may want to make peace with the other person, but they have no desire. And, you know, what do you do in a situation like that? And this comes in part of the escalation, where there is small attempts to reach out and it magnifies or proliferates. And sometimes you have to remember that the Apostle Paul says, if at all possible, live peaceably with all men. So you have to be the person who will have to take the initiative in all cases, not because the other person does not want to respond in an appropriate way or in a positive way. It does not mean that you stop reaching out. Make sure that you don't triangulate. Make sure that you don't put down the person. Make sure that you don't say things to give a negative image or a negative perception of the person. You still reach out and make sure that you take responsibility for your part. And even if the person may have said things to make you feel hurt, you have a responsibility to manage, as you heard, and as we heard you say earlier, Sister Sharon, that person will have to make sure that they act in those ways. We talk about some of the consequences, political and national conflicts can lead to sometimes serious division in countries. Internal civil conflicts, and we see that in terms of national, international conflicts. We see this, so it moves from perhaps two groups within the church, and you may see this as two groups within a nation. One for the ruling party, another for the opposed to that party, and those opposed may have national protests, and those in power might use their power to suppress the efforts of those who are protesting what they do not like. So sometimes you find that. Sometimes even in the church, you might find one group who is for the person, another group who is saying, no, we don't agree with what so-and-so said or what so-and-so did on a matter of principle. So sometimes you find that. One of the sad consequences of conflicts is mental illness. It is where persons, when this war inside of them cannot be quelled or cannot be managed, they can get ill. Some years ago, I did a study which included researching or taking data from persons who were in a mental institution. And these were two mental institutions. And one of the things I found, I was exploring the religious factor in mental illness, how persons became mentally ill as a result of their understanding of the religious component. And I found from this study that when persons are pressured to be in a religious context where it is legalistic, where you insist that people do this, do that, do the other, people become conflicted and confused. When they become conflicted and confused, it could cause them to become mentally ill. So they end up in a mental institution.
Wow.
Okay. We found that there was, for example, a lady who said her parents wanted her to be a nun. And she did not want to do that. She was a Roman Catholic. She did not want to be a nun. And this conflict with what she wanted versus what her parents wanted caused her to end up in a mental institution. There are cases where this other person, her parents, her church insisted that she that she did not process her hair any at all. And there are some other rules that the church had. And she found some of those conflicting. And she ended up, because of those conflicting rules that the church had, she ended up in a mental institution. So another thing, churches can be causes of conflict, as well as churches should enable people or facilitate people who are in conflict to be able to resolve it. But sometimes the church can be the party to conflict in people's lives. And as church, we always have to bear that. It is something I'm ever mindful of as a leader, to be so careful that you are able to connect with people so that they don't go away with views about the church and about the position we hold that is not true. That is why we can't control everything. People will think what they want and do what they want and sometimes blame the church. That is something that we can't take responsibility for. But where we can take, where we know that we can offer clear guidance and people may not respond to that, then we need to know where we have to take responsibility. But we can't take on everything. Everything is not our fault. And that's very, very important that we know that. But,
very important.
Right. But we need to bear in mind that persons can become mentally ill where they may find that there is a situation of constant conflict and management of their own beliefs with what they may hear from the inside or what they may be hearing from outside. One of the things that happens with some persons, and is a negative side of conflict, is that, and I say it with different, even sometimes in relationships. In relationships, part of the conflict with two people is that somebody goes into a relationship, and this can cause a couple to a marital relationship to end, because the person is speaking, you married to somebody, but when you realize the person you are married to is not one person, is one person physically, but the person is hearing the voice of their mother, they're hearing the voice of their teacher, they're hearing the voice of their pastor, they're hearing the voice of a mentor they had when they were younger. So in other words, you are dealing with one person, but it's several voices in their heads you're dealing with, and they have to contend with which of these voices they are listening to. And sometimes they can't make the resolution in themselves as to who they are going to listen to. So sometimes, depending on the situation, one voice may be more dominant, and that is the voice you may hear, and that is the voice they may respond to. You have to realize that this can happen. And for some people, it can be so conflicting for them that, as I say, it creates mental disturbance in a relationship, in a person's life, and that person can impact others negatively. So we have to be mindful of these negative factors, negative consequences to conflict. Therefore, Sister Sharon, if conflict creates so much problem, how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to manage? We have to find a cure. And I really want to charge you to tell me what your experience has been when you share with your counselees. What is it that you have found work for you? Let's talk a little more about that, Sister Sharon.
Yes, thank you so much, Rev. And you know, it has been really good listening to this and just bearing in mind the positive. Sometimes we like to think of only of the positive. However, really and truly, the challenges of the whole thing, that there are negative consequences. And in fact, probably, you know, even as we share with a group and so on, this group right here now, you know, we will probably ask them what are some of the positive consequences that they have found in conflict. If they ever found any, they could drop it in the chat. Or if they found negative consequences, what they have done about it. People could probably just right now, you know, because I was speaking to this group and I'm speaking to this group from Calvary in New York. So we open up to Calvary now for the next couple of minutes to ask some positive and negative consequences you've found. You can drop it in the chat or any other concerns to raise before we go on to the cure. We'll do a little bit of the cure and then take a slightly longer break to refresh ourselves and come back to finish off that part. So I want to open first to that. So the floor is open right here now. Anybody has any comments, questions, or experiences? We can do that for the next 5 minutes. And I'm setting my timer, so, you know, we're trying to really keep the time, but we are open to put in, or you can put them in the chat.
Well, I would speak.
Yes, go ahead.
I am Miss Alexander. I'm Nurse Henry's colleague. And I would say in my household, I could speak in my household, raising my children and being married like 33 years, we have come to, when dealing with conflicts or any type of issues in our household, I had formulated where we would come to the round table in my home. And one thing, everyone had to be on the same page. So we will, I basically kind of like put the rules in motion. So basically, no matter what anyone said, we were not allowed to get upset. We were not allowed to take it personally, but to actually listen to what the individual had to say, and then take whatever was said to us, either negative or positive. And usually at our table it will be negative. So I'll give an example. Like my children used to say to me, "Oh, you know, Mom, when you came home from work, you would never say like, good afternoon. It was like you had a radar would go up and you would just look around and you say, why is the shoes here? Why is the book bag here? Why is the coat here? Why is it this here? Right? And even though I did that, it never really dawned on me like what impact it had on my children.
Yes.
And because it came up on the round table,
Yes.
I was like, I don't do that. They were like, yes, mom, you do. You know, you don't say how our day is going, you know, what happened in school. It was just basically looking at all the negative things within the home that we didn't do that we know we're supposed to do. Right. So with that being said, all that came at myself, and basically we also, as the parents, we share with our children what we didn't like. We had to take what was given to us,
Yes.
digest it, work on it, right? Work on it. So within that week, we gave it like about a week and a half, and then we will come back to the table and say, was there any improvement? Did did mom actually come in this time and not say anything negative and actually recognize that we went to school and maybe our day could have been challenging, and we found out from each other and we learned from each other. And
Yes.
I could say just by doing that at a very young, tender age with my children, I mean, my children are all grown now. No matter what, they will come to me, they'll still do the round robin table, and my children are like 29, 25, 33. And they'll still come on, mom, we have something to say. So we still come together as of today, still speak, nothing, no conflicts, because they've learned myself, like if I have any issues with my husband, they would know like, oh, just bring mom a cup of tea, because they know tea kind of calm me down. So I could be upset and the children would say to me, Mom, are you really upset because dad also left the coat on the chair? And I'm like, yes, it's really a pet peeve for myself, right? But I have learned throughout the years, that the important thing is just communicating, like you said. And you're I love what you have shared out. Very informative. Communication is the key, right? And instead of blaming, like, what you did this and you did this, how could we work at it? And, how could we actually take what we don't like to see? So we won't even say it's negative, what we don't like to see, because children will be children, right? And turn it around for the positive. So in my case, that's how, I deal in my household. And also, like, if I had any issue, I could also share, like, if I had any issue with my husband, sometimes, little things, that I don't like, like my table, I like my table set. So if there's a book on the table, it's like I escalate to 360. So instead of me getting to that point, I like to write notes. That's one thing I like to write notes, because I work in the school system. So I have all my notes up, and, they were like, well, Mom, are you going to leave that note there? Someone come by? Absolutely. Until, that, you get it within your spirit, because after a while, they do get it. They do get it. And then you just take the note down. All right. So that's just my take on that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nurse Alexander. We really appreciate that. And I like that round table talk example. Mm-hmm. And so you see, that is practical ways of putting it into practice.
Absolutely.
And did I hear another voice? We'll have one more minute if somebody was going to say something. There was an example too that I learned of a man who was very neat, a husband. He was extremely neat and his wife was very messy. And he was explaining to the counselor that eventually he sort of resolved the situation. And they said, what, did your wife get neater? He said, no. But funnily enough, the way I sorted it out was, I thought to myself, what would happen if my wife had died and she wasn't around? Or if she was able to come back, but she was going to be still messy, which would I prefer? And he realized that he would prefer to have his wife around, even not neat, than to lose her altogether. And when he did that, he recognized this is a personality and style difference. and he could live with it. So sometimes it's just changing our perspectives as well as getting the feedback. Thank you so much for sharing. As we move into the consequences, the cure, we are going to just do one aspect now about mediation. There are 3 areas. And then after the mediation, then we will take a break so we can refresh ourselves. And then we will wrap up with forgiveness, change of heart, and the homework. So mediation is where we are going now. Over to you, Reb.
Okay, thank you again for the progress we are making so far. And as we deal with this aspect of cure, we are going to just look at a strategy that is sometimes used to deal with conflict and to mediate the conflict. And I'll just share with you some aspects of how that can be done. One of the things that I have found is that even before I get into the mediation, is one of the things that mediation does is that it develops the capacity for dispute and conflict resolution. And I think this is very important from the outset, is to develop the capacity and help persons to do that. What Jesus explained, for example, in Matthew 18 is based on those assumptions. Jesus indicated that if 2 persons were in any conflict, here is an approach that they were to use to deal with a particular dispute. And he gave this in a way where he's saying that I want to see that you have developed an approach to managing conflict and to deal with dispute, that it's a capacity, it's a skill that you have developed. So if somebody sins against you, go and point out the fault with the 2 of you alone. And if the member listens to you, you have regained that one. If the person does not listen according to Jesus, take 1 or 2 other persons along with you so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. And this was a standard biblical, standard Old Testament practice, that in a testimony would be given in the presence of 2 witnesses, that they could testify that yes, this was said, and yes, this was acknowledged in the presence of the other. Now, if the person refused to listen to them, then that is where you move it now from the smaller space of 2 persons, of you and the person and 2 witnesses, to you take it to the whole church. And if the offender still refused to listen to the leadership of the church or the whole church, then you are to let such a person be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. And one of the important things about that is to remember that for Jesus, a Gentile and a tax collector were always persons who were sought. They were outside the church, but they were persons who were sought after. So you have to see these people as if they are non-believers, as if they don't belong to the church. But it doesn't mean you abandon them. It doesn't mean you reject them. It doesn't mean you don't treat them like they are not connected. It just means that based on their behavior and lack of responsiveness, you have to treat them like outsiders of the church. And outsiders of the church mean you don't turn your back on them. You have to reach out to them as if they are sinners to be redeemed, but you still have a responsibility. So what I'm saying here is, in the whole area of mediation, is about developing the capacity to be able to negotiate and develop the capacity to even mediate. And like the 2 persons who are witnesses, they would be, in a sense, acting in that capacity. So the first step in acknowledging that the conflict can be resolved, when you are seeking to go the route of mediation, whether by someone from the church who is going to seek to hear the dispute between two of you, or two persons who are in a conflict, who are disputants, who have a dispute, is to bear in mind that you need to acknowledge that there is something, a conflict you have, and you're having some difficulty resolving it. So you may go to your pastor, or you may go to a deacon or an elder or someone who can offer some help. What mediation does is that it facilitates decision making. It helps persons to be able to make a decision. So you have to arrive at something. Rather than ignore the problem, rather than treat it as if it doesn't exist, you have to arrive, you have to make a decision. And that is what this does. Now, some of these decisions can be rights-based. It is important that we make a decision on this matter because I feel that my rights are being violated, or I feel that the rights of the other person are being violated, and therefore a decision has to be made. I need to have my rights addressed. Okay, so the decision, it can be driven by the desire to acknowledge or to settle rights. It could be driven by the desire to deal with interest. Within a church, you may have particular interest. One group may feel that it is important to build a hard court for children in the community who do not have any place to play, to be able to play on the hard court that the church provides. Some members may think that, no, they have no interest in that because the children are going to make up noise in the churchyard. They're not only going to make up noise, they are going to break the church windows, and they don't want the little boy then playing a ball in the churchyard. So again, this could be interest related. Some people may be interested in seeing the children progress. Some people might be more interested in the preservation of the property and the aesthetics of the property, and that might be their interest. That's where the conflict is. So sometimes you might need to mediate between members who may. I'm going to go through these quickly so we don't spend a lot of time on them, but just to go through the range, some of the areas of mediation. When is mediation useful within a context? It's useful if the issues are complicated by strong emotions, where persons insist that this is their position. And going back to what you had said earlier, Sister Sharon, when you are fighting fairly or fighting in different ways, and some of the rules of those conflicts, it depends on the degree. If somebody say over my dead body, you might need some kind of mediation in that case, because it's a very high degree of conflict for them. And it is clear that by themselves, they would not be able to work this out. They need a third party. Okay. It is also helpful if the parties know each other, because sometimes when there's big conflict or major conflict, the parties are not strangers. They know one another. They know each other's background. Sometimes they went to school together. Sometimes they were even married, or sometimes they are even married. And sometimes they are of the same family. And sometimes they go to the same school. They are teacher and students. It could be church member and church member, church member and church leader. So usually when they know each other, maintaining a relationship is important for them. They want to maintain a relationship, but this is a conflict that they want to sort out. Confronting each other without a third party is uncomfortable. So they would want mediation. They would want somebody to be there because they find it uncomfortable, and they may feel that, boy, they might not get justice. They just feel uncomfortable and need somebody else to be there. And they want to reach a decision soon because they don't want to maintain this tension and this dis-ease for too long. They really want it settled. And the parties by themselves doubt their ability to solve the problem. It is usually in these cases that mediation can be very important. The other thing is that it is not appropriate if people are too upset to carry on a useful conversation. That when they start to have a conversation, as Sister Alexander had said earlier, she set the ground rules for her family table talk. And when that happens, you're not going to have anybody shouting at each other at the table, etc. Now, sometimes mediation will not be appropriate if people are too upset to carry on a useful conversation. Okay? Sometimes you have to mediate between two people in the community, and then make sure that when they come, you have to go to them and say, okay, whatever weapons you bring, you have to leave it outside or give it to me.
Yeah.
Okay? Sometimes they actually bring physical weapons, or sometimes you have to say to them, if you know that this is the approach they are going to take. There is a suspicion that one party wants to use the mediation to escalate the dispute. Okay? And so if you know that, if you have a suspicion, the mediation not going to work. If one party will not listen to the mediator because they don't trust the mediator, or they don't feel that the mediator can handle it, it's not going to work either. If the issue deserves public attention, then mediation not going to work. You just have to say, hey, this is something that requires public attention because somebody was affected publicly, and it is important that other persons be alerted or warned of this particular action so that it doesn't happen to anybody else. And this is something that may require that kind of attention. That the key parties are unwilling to participate. You can't have a mediation and the two disputants, the two persons who are, as it were, at war with each other, don't want to participate in the mediation. So if they are unwilling to participate, you're not going to make much progress. So what are you looking for? In a mediation, you want to identify whether you are the mediator or anybody who's going to mediate. These are important characteristics that you develop. You don't have to necessarily be a trained mediator. You can be a trained mediator, but even without your training as a mediator, you need to bear these principles in mind. A mediator must be somebody who is patient as the disputants slowly move to resolution. If you don't have patience, take yourself out of a mediation. Don't tell people, say you are going to sit with them. If you're going to get angry with them, then you are the wrong person to be the mediator. You have to be patient. Mediation takes time, and you have to listen to people, wait on them, be patient, and just listen. You have to be able to empathize and be gentle. So each person must feel that they are getting justice. If they ever sense that you are biased towards one or the other, they're going to get up from the mediation table. They're going to get up from where they are. So if you bring them together, you need to be able to empathize and be gentle. The other thing, you need to be able to withhold judgment. So you can't be in a situation with disputants and you begin to dispense judgment to one over the other. And you begin to tell the other person, but you're wrong, sister so-and-so, you're wrong. Or you tell brother so-and-so, but brother so-and-so, you're wrong, man, you're wrong. You finish the mediation, it stopped right there. So if you begin to do that, it cannot work if you begin to apply judgment. You have to withhold it, even if you think so in your heart. Don't say anything, don't say it. Listen first to what they have to say. And when you hear what they have to say, you are going to help them to determine who is at fault. And by helping them and listening to them, you will find out that both of them will accept responsibility, and because you facilitate the process, will come to a resolution on their own. You have to be impartial. You have to be impartial if you are a mediator. You have to put aside your own opinion. Because remember, you do not come to the table mindless. You do not come to the table without your own values. You do not come to the table without your particular social or personal bias. You have a bias. Maybe if it's a situation where a woman is abused and you grow up feeling that women should never be abused, you may feel you want to knock that man's head out so much. You have to reserve your feelings and you have to hold your opinions. Okay? Or if it's a situation where the man was a child abuser and you just feel that every pedophile or every child abuser should rot in jail, even if you feel very strongly about that, you have to listen to the case. You have to be impartial. You have to put aside And that's a different matter in terms of mediation. Sometimes that is a clear case where you just have to punish the person who is guilty of that, and you don't need mediation. That is why I say you have to know what cases are appropriate for mediation. You have to have a low need for recognition. If you are somebody who like for people to big up your ego, to massage your ego and make you feel good and say, yes, Mr. So-and-so, yes, Mrs. So-and-so, yeah. If you are somebody who love that, mediation may not be for you, because you must have a low need for recognition, a low need for credit. In other words, you're not thriving on that to help the persons. And you must not be someone who must have things turning your way. Okay? So you have to be prepared to let things go. In terms of some of the things in terms of mediation, in terms of the context quickly, is that you have to set a courteous, unhurried tone. So in the space where you're going to meet, you invite the people, and if there is a dispute and you're going to settle, be unhurried. Just make them feel relaxed. Explain, listening and speaking. Each person will have a turn to speak. Listen to what each person has to say, and let them know that you will give them a chance to speak. One of the things that when people have disputes and why they need mediator is that they feel that their position is not being heard. They feel that when they speak, nobody hears them. So if they come to you, don't let them say, see there, not even the mediator listening to me. Not even the deacon, not even the pastor, not even the choir director, the person who have gone to. So you have to make sure that you explain to them the importance of listening and speaking, so that the person who is speaking speak clearly and the other person listen. And when the other person who was listening is now speaking, the first person must listen. The other thing, they need to listen without making any comments. Listen without turning up their eyes in the air and say, what a man lie. What a sister, boy, she need to go back to Calvary. You have to be able to, you explain to them, you don't do that. Listen, even if you think the person's telling a lie, make little notes on your paper that you can deal with that after. But don't keep turning up your head into the ceiling and say, Lord, boy, me can't, pass me, can't sit down in this room and listen to this woman tell, sister tells much lie for me. Okay? You have to be in a mediation situation, you just have to listen. And you have to select someone to start. So you can say, okay, who wants to start first? Maybe it could be the person who brought the dispute to your attention. Or you could say, let them choose who is going to start first. So you're really putting it in their hands. And you continue with the context. You have to make sure that you protect each person's speaking time. So if they have 2 minutes to speak, let the person who speak first speak for 2 minutes. If the other person has 2 minutes to speak, let them speak 2 minutes without being interrupted. You have to monitor that. And then you're going to formally end each person who speaks in turn. You have to check that the person is finished. So clear with them, are you finished with what you are saying? And you thank them and you move on. Sometimes you might give a brief summary of say, okay, so you have said 1, 2, 3, 4, and you note that. And they will correct or say, no, I didn't say that, but so you can adjust and make sure that you note what they have said. Okay. I think there is just one other thing that I want to say on this, is that in the exchange of the mediation, you have to refrain from giving, and this is the last point I want to raise, Sister Sharon. You have to refrain from finding solutions. That's not your job initially. You have to refrain from finding solutions to the conflict that they're having. Just listen to them, and sometimes they may come to the realization themselves. I wanted a case where there are 2 people who were in a dispute. One person was the owner of a property that he had tenanted to somebody else. In tenanting that property to the other person had done some repairs to the property, and the landlord or the person who had tenanted the property wanted to charge a little more for rent. And so the person said, no, they're not paying anymore, because whatever money they would have had to pay for the rent, they use it to help the person to improve their house. But the person insisted that they need the money, and the other person insisted that they can't pay anymore. So I helped them to look at the situation. One of the things I said, look at this now. How much more are you willing to pay? Person was not willing to pay anymore. I asked the other person, how much do you want? And he indicated what he wanted. I said, well, look here. If this person is going to stay in the place for another couple of weeks or another couple of months, if you don't take any rent, and if he is staying, the long and short of the story, I got them to the point where they realized that the man who, the member, the person who had the property, realized that by the investment put in by the other person, when the person left that situation and was no longer a tenant, their property had increased in value, and they would now be able to rent the place for more. So, and it's a fixed property. The person who was a tenant, when they leave, the person would still have the property. And so through understanding that, they realize, okay, they probably can give up something more now, but they're going to get it back later down the road. And that was how they were able to resolve that conflict. And both of them went away happy. So the man didn't insist on any more right away, and the person who had to pay didn't have any more to pay. But he knew that when that tenant was no longer there, his property had appreciated in value, and he could ask for more rent. So they were able to settle the dispute. So refrain from finding solutions yet. Initially, you have to wait until you have summarized their interest and their concern. But what for moments of understanding or reconciliation, listen to them to see where they are, listen to how they are treating the matter within the church, or if it's a family matter, or it's a matter between siblings, or it's a matter between couples, listen to how they are treating it. Look out for moments of understanding or reconciliation. And then you can summarize their interests and their concerns, and then put it to them and say, since this is what you want, it seems as if by taking this approach, you both may get what you want. And so sometimes this is how you approach the mediation situation. I have given a kind of a summary form of mediation. This certainly is not all we would engage in a mediation setting, but when you have to mediate between two people who are in dispute, always remember your role as a mediator. You cannot take sides. You have to be patient. You have to listen to the persons. You have to help them to be able to work through and to listen to each other. And I know sometimes they'll be anxious. They'll want you to show partiality, but you have to reserve judgment, and you have to hold your position until you have gone through the dispute with them. So this is what I would encourage Sister Sharon.
Thank you so much for that. We're very, very, very informative, and I realize it's hard work. No wonder Jethro told Moses when Moses was mediating all day, what you're doing is too hard. You need to have some people help you and all of that. Or coming out of that was the Jethro principle, eh? Because you could imagine poor Moses doing that all day and listening to these disputes. He wouldn't have survived as long as he did had Jethro not told him, boy, that's hard work. Well, I take off my hat to you. Really do. Yes. So people of Calvary, we're going to take a break now. We have appreciated your attention and everything, and we know that you should be hungry, thirsty, and all of that. So we are proposing at this stage, and we're into the home stretch, because when we come back, we'll have just under an hour. It is 12:51 by my clock, and I think we're still on the same time, or 12:50 schedules. So if we could get back 1:05, we're going to make it 10 minutes, but 15 minutes. so that we get on to the home stretch, which will be the forgiveness and change of heart. All right, so 15 minutes break, and we have some music that we can put on. And this is just a little taste of what you're going to be enjoying later, but we hope you are refreshed. And before we go any further, just for our interest, we would love to know in the chat. I know Pastor Henry had given us an idea of the distribution in the church in general. However, if you can put in the chat what's your nationality, just so we have an idea, you know, if of those we are connecting with here, you can just drop your nationality in the chat. That would be nice. And even if you're born in the US, but you have heritage from another country, you could also put that as a two-part. And welcome back, everybody. All right, so we see in Jamaica. I've seen one person, so one person is from Jamaica. All right, yes. Seen Janet Conroy, Jamaica. Maybe typing in the chat might be hard for some people. All right, we're seeing another Jamaica. So I probably should ask, is there anybody who is from another country? You can either, Grenada, all right. We're seeing Grenada. And the Grenada again, yes. Wonderful. That's a spice island, right? I've yet to visit Grenada, but hope to get there one day. Awesome. Well, welcome back, everybody. We have limited time, and we're going to we've been looking at, as we know, the Chronicles of Conflict. And so we were giving you some C's to deal with conflict. Can anybody drop in the chat what are some of the C's that we spoke about when we spoke about conflict? Can either drop it in the chat or just open your mic and say it, whichever is easier for you. Any of the C's that we spoke about as we were chronicling conflict. Or should we start over the presentation? Just kidding. Any C's, anybody? Characteristics, thank you. So we started with
criticism.
Well, we mentioned criticism on the headings, and probably I'll just share screen and show you this again. What else?
Poor communication.
Right, we spoke about communication, and I will come back here. There. So we had the concept, causes, characteristics, the consequences, which could be positive or negative, and now we're on to the cure. And this is not an exhaustive presentation. There's no way that we could do everything. However, we're looking at some ways in which we can address it. So these are some of the C's of the conflict that we are looking at. So far on the cure, we've looked at mediation, we're going to forgiveness and change of heart. And so we have done a different role play on forgiveness. And I'm going to just share in another setting for another group. And I'll just share a little introduction of that role play so that you will get a feel of it. And then go into some aspects of forgiveness that can help us, because with conflict, if we end up not in a good fight, but a bad fight, with serious conflict, we will come to a crisis, which will lead to the need for forgiveness. So in this excerpt of this role play, you will see Sister Sharon and Rev again. However, this time, Sister Sharon is a Sunday school teacher, speaking to Rev about some conflicts that she heard about, some forgiveness issues in her adult Sunday school class. And so here comes the excerpt. And let me make sure that I have share sound on. Yes. So here comes this excerpt. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet me via this Zoom call. I'm a little hassled and harried, having had a full day of work, but this meeting was very, very important to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you have come. So what it is that you want to talk about? I remember you're talking about some things related to your Sunday school class. What are the concerns you want to share with me this evening?
Well, as you know, I'm an adult Sunday school teacher for years. However, at this particular time, in this month, we have been doing a series, it being Family Month, on issues with the family. And this month, we have been focusing on Jacob's family. And really, our class has been processing some of the things that have come up. And boy, what a dysfunctional family that is. However, the issues of forgiveness are the ones that have really sort of hit us along the way. One of the things that we struggled with, and even if you look in the news, Pastor, some of the things that have come up, just even Sunday's Gleaner, so many things are there. First and foremost, we saw the thing about Keith Clark's widow and the issues that she's still going through 11 years after his killing by the soldiers. She has struggles there dealing with it. We heard about the man who doused the woman and set her afire in the country. And on top of that, we also saw even the royal family still struggling, Harry and William, years after Diana's death, because this BBC religious editor actually got this interview with Diana under false pretenses, which looked like it caused a whole big thing that eventually indirectly led to her death. So many people have a lot of pain. And then in our class now, we were talking about lots of struggles that people have had. So for instance, this man was talking about one member, about knowing somebody else who had what, in our Jamaican parlance, struggling with the grief of discovering that he has a jacket, as we say, a child that's not his, and the anger and hurt that is there, and bitterness. And then another person was talking about a co-worker who set her up and made her lose her job. Another one was talking about a church member who borrowed money from her for an emergency, but years later hasn't paid back the money. And as a result, she now is out of pocket, especially during this pandemic. Then again, there was another one about somebody else talking about the fact that the family member, they were trying to protect the whole family, and the family member this young man went out partying with friends in this pandemic and brought home COVID, and there it is. The father ended up in ICU and almost died. So many things are there in the class that are just making people upset. Extramarital affairs among people in a committee, on church, and so on. Just so many things. But Rev, it's just a difficult time, and so many things that could make people so bitter and all of that.
Yeah, Sister Sharon, it seems like you really have a lot of stuff there. And I hear you reflecting on so many issues and so many concerns coming from some of the members in your class. I just wondered, as you have talked about all of this, and as I said, I feel the struggle and I feel the concern. Are there any personal struggles that you are dealing with in all of this, though? I mean, I hear you talking about the other persons. Is there anything that is coming out of it where you are concerned?
Yes, Rev. Boy, it's so painful. I can't even talk about it in much detail. But somebody did something to me and it hurt so bad. It has hurt so bad, Pastor, that, even though I've been trying to get over it, I can't sleep well. I think about what they have done to me. I can't eat well. In fact, if they come into the room that I am in any place, I feel like the oxygen is being sucked out of the room. If they are invited to a function and I know they're going to be there, I just don't go. If somebody who knows the two of us talks about the person in my presence, a friend of mine, and they're talking about them, especially if they say something nice, I feel like I want to just stop being friends with that person. It's hard for me to pray as a result. And, even reading my Bible now, it kind of feels empty because really and truly, to be honest with, I wish that God would just zap this person. God would just kill the person. I fortunately can't see myself killing the person, but I wouldn't mind if, sometimes I even wish, boy, I wish they would get COVID or something like that. I feel so angry about the person. And, as a result, I don't know, maybe I'm wondering if I should even stop being a Sunday school teacher, because there's a part about, when Jesus talks about forgiveness, and then even Stephen in the Bible spoke about forgiveness. And I said, I'm not Jesus and I'm not Stephen, and I'm not going to make anybody crucify me or stone me. I'd rather stone them back or run away. Rev, I don't know. I don't know if I can deal with this, because I don't want to talk to this person. And I don't ever want to be in any connection with this person. And I really don't wish them well.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was an excerpt from another role play, just putting in feelings that persons can go through when we reach a crisis of forgiveness. And so we recognize that sometimes people hurt us so badly that it is difficult to forgive. Even good Christian people who are caring and would never harm anybody may not wish the person well. So for the next few minutes, we're going to just look at just a brief look at some of the issues to do with forgiveness and ways to approach it. And it will be in a mixed way. And so I'm back to my PowerPoint and go back to where we would have come on and share that. That was a whole presentation, which would be another couple of hours. So this is just a taste of what we were talking about. And so in that scenario, what we had was that Sister Sharon, who had been through this painful situation and had told Rev her feelings and all of that about it over a series of a year, went to a counseling, went to a support group and worked through issues to the point where she was able to write a poem and share it with Pastor in that role play. And so I'll start by sharing what was an outcome and then break down some of the challenges with forgiveness. So this is kind of like the goal, and then work our way backward. So this is a poem called "To Truly Live, We Must Forgive." She went through a great crisis. Her feelings were so hurt. She wanted to get back at him, have revenge for dessert. Then she read a book that helped her let go, move on, and live. She found peace and liberation by learning to forgive. Forgive and Forget, the book by Louis Smedes, Encourage her with laws like the Persians and the Medes. Step 1, tell God, yourself, and others the deep hurt you feel inside. Step 2, before all else, to forgive, you must decide. Reach out for God's help is step number 3. Step 4, receive empathetic support from your community. Pay close attention to the process is step 5 in number. The journey is lengthy. It may disturb your peace and the slumber. One bright day, you will see your goal round the final bend. And in step 6, to the offender, step 6, move forward to the offender, forgiveness extend. If they are abusive, do not take the chance to get too close to them. Pardon from safe distance. Steps 1 to 6 are your sole responsibility, even if the offender doesn't seek your pardon or pity. The 7th and final step is a little different. For complete reconciliation, the offender must repent. The 7 A's of forgiveness described for you above: acknowledge, aspire, ask, associate with those you love, accept, approach, if safe, assess for grounds to reconcile. God commands us to forgive. He makes it worth our while. If you have been hurt and feel angry or blue, to pardon the perpetrator means liberation for you. If not, you'll fall prey to the devil's schemes and lies, drinking the bitterness poison and hoping the offender dies. And C.S. Lewis put it this way: to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. And so, in Mark 1:11-25 from the New Living Translation, but when you are praying, first forgive anyone you are holding a grudge against, so that your Father in heaven will forgive your sin too. And so, as we have shared before, we have had a group that we've run called Fresh Start, a divorce recovery support group. And we encounter, and I personally have encountered the pain years ago of separation, divorce, and had to work through issues of forgiveness. And by God's grace, have come a long way. That was a couple decades ago. But going through this whole pain of separation and divorce, or going through any pain of hurt and loss, can leave us totally devastated. And I want to just encourage us with 7 A's of forgiveness. I'll summarize in the poem, but I'll go through them in a little more detail now. 1 is acknowledge that you have been hurt. Acknowledge that to God, to yourself, and to the other person. Now, that acknowledgement doesn't necessarily mean, and it doesn't only apply to a couple. It can apply in any situation where you've been hurt. Just acknowledge that you've been hurt, okay? That's important, because sometimes as Christians, we feel that we can't say we have been hurt, or it's, we have to be nice and peaceful, but we can't heal unless we first acknowledge that we have been hurt. Can't heal what hasn't been hurt. So we acknowledge that we have been hurt. Then the next step is to aspire to forgive. That means make that decision that we're going to forgive. Now, I like to look at it this way, that there are 2 roads we can take. There's the bitterness road and there's the forgiveness road. They go in opposite directions. So we can either decide from the beginning that we are going to get revenge or be bitter or hold up somebody in our hearts, or we can decide we're going to forgive. But they are in opposite directions. Not only that, the bitterness road is a shorter road. So if we're getting to point bitterness, we'll get there very quickly. The forgiveness road is a very long road because it takes a long while, and the deeper the hurt is the longer the road and the more time it will take to forgive. But that is for us to recognize. But we make the decision, which way am I going to turn? Am I going on the bitterness road or the forgiveness road? Aspire to forgive. Then the third one is ask God to help. So we acknowledge that we have been hurt. We aspire to forgive. Step 3 is we ask God to help. Because forgiveness is not natural. Bitterness is natural. Revenge is natural. That's the way of the world. That's the way we are wired. Okay, from we are small, if you look at that little child, they are hit back, all of that. It's a natural thing. So we need to ask God to help us to forgive and recognize if he's asking us to forgive, then we need his help. And say, God, by myself, I can't do it. I need your help. Okay, so we prayerfully ask God to help us. And we might need to ask him over and over and over again. That's okay. God wants us to ask and he's willing to help us. And then 4, associate with those who will encourage us to forgive. Now we have 2 sorts of friends we can hang out with. We can hang out with those who would say, if I were in your position, I would have to take revenge. I'd have to get back at the person. I wouldn't take that from them at all. No, 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 no. Nobody's going to treat me like that. No, Or we can associate with somebody who would say, what was done to you is wrong. We're not asking them to belittle your pain. No, the person must say, this wasn't fair. You shouldn't have been treated in that way. Anyway, my dear, hush, never mind, forgive, okay? So this now is somebody who feels or shares an understanding of our pain and the injustice we went through, and at the same time is still encouraging us to forgive. Choose who we hang out with, okay? Because if not, we could easily get caught up in the fire and the fume that we are already feeling in ourselves. So associate with those who will encourage us to forgive. That's step 4. Step 5 is accept that it will take time. As Christians, sometimes there's a thought that I will forgive quickly. No, not because God commands us to forgive means that it's going to be a quick process. We need to accept that it will take time, and that is okay. When we have gone on this forgiveness road, we start on it. Sometimes there are going to be roadblocks on the way. Sometimes there are going to be detours. Sometimes there are going to be potholes. Sometimes there are going to be mountains. Sometimes there are going to be storms. However, we are on the journey and it will take time. So accept that it will take time. And then the next one is after all of this, so you recognize now it is a process. And sometimes while we're trying to forgive somebody for one thing, they hurt us again. That's called a rewounding. And so in the middle of all of this, we kind of like we take a step back. Or if we're climbing a cliff, we fall down a little bit. And then we have to start again, okay? But we're on the journey. So we need to be patient and know that God isn't asking us to hurry. He is on the journey with us. And then now, step 6 now is approach the person. And I always like to say, if safe, and extend forgiveness. Why if safe? Because in some situations of abuse and so on, someone may just not be able to, you might not be able to approach the person because you go and say, I forgive you, and the person hit you down and say, for what? Or you deserve it, or you deserve more. Or the person might even do more bodily harm to you. So in some situations, it may not be safe to approach a person and you have to forgive them from a distance. However, notice that all of those steps so far, acknowledge that you have been hurt, aspire to forgive, ask God to help, associate with those who will encourage you to forgive, accept that it will take time, and approaching the person if safe, and extending forgiveness. You notice in all of that, I haven't said anything about the person saying they are sorry. Okay? When you're a child and so on, and your parents say, or your guardian say you're sorry, or a teacher say you're sorry, and they say, no, they must say sorry first, and so on. We sometimes think that that's how life is. No, some really and truly, we are to extend forgiveness. The Bible says if you carry your gift to the altar, you know that your brother has ought against you, then we leave the thing and go and say sorry. But it also says, if you have something against your brother, still leave your gift at the altar and go and make peace with them. So as far as possible, we need to extend that forgiveness. Now, this is important because quite often, the way I look at it is I believe God is fair, God is just. And God couldn't command us to forgive if it depended on the other person. All right? It must only depend on us with God's help. So forgiveness, that extending of forgiveness is a one-way, one-sided thing with God's help and with the support of faithful friends and encouraging people and prayer. However, the final step now, assess whether there are grounds for reconciliation. In this one, reconciliation is a two-way street, meaning while we can forgive, even if the other person is not repentant, even if they're not sorry, even if they would do the same or worse to us again, even if they never ever acknowledge that they were wrong, we are still to forgive. But when it comes to reconciling, a full reconciliation, reinstating them into a position where they could do something again, that depends on repentance. And if you think about it, with us, God has forgiven us already. When Jesus died on the cross, he forgave. He paid the penalty for all our sins, the sins of past generations, present generations, future generations, all our sins, past, present, and future, our personal sins, each of us. And if we were the only person to be on the earth who committed a sin, Jesus would die for me alone. So we need to remember that. At the same time, while the forgiveness is there for us to be reconciled with God, we need to repent. And in the same way, for reconciliation, full reconciliation, the other person needs to repent. So 1 to 6, we are to forgive. And that's why when Peter asked, how many times should I forgive? 7 times, and Jesus said 70 times 7, which is not really just 490, we mean an infinite amount of times. That is because it is not dependent on the other person, but God commands us to forgive, and he will enable and empower us to forgive. However, when it comes to reconciling, if somebody is always stealing money from the church offering and so on, you're not going to put them back, if they have not repented, you're not going to put them back in charge of that role in the church. They repent and they come back, that is fine. But if they have not acknowledged that they have a problem, if they haven't sought help to deal with it, then it would be unwise. And Jesus said, we should be astute as a serpent and gentle as a dove. We still have to be wise in the decisions that we make. Even our children, if for instance, your child has a drug habit or some other habit, and they're sorry that they stole your money, or they have some other thing, or they drive your car recklessly, it's not wise to put them back in charge of the car if they have not shown any change of heart and attitude. So forgiveness, you forgive them. Forgive them for writing off your car, but you're not going to buy another car and just let them write off the next one. That's not wise. Forgive them for whatever, whoever it is, co-worker, neighbor, spouse, child, whoever, church member. However, the actual reconciliation is a two-sided thing. So there we have the 7 A's of forgiveness. And I'll just share a couple of more things about it here now as I share the screen again. Let me share screen. So when we go through, one of the things that helped me a lot when I was processing forgiveness was really truly this book by Forgive and Forget, which was by this pastor, written by a pastor called Louis Smedes. It's probably not even in print now, but it was really good. And he says we go through these four phases. First, we actually hate. We feel like we hurt. We hurt first. We feel really a lot of hurt when somebody has done something to us. And then we hate them. We actually feel hate. Now we say, no, good Christian people are not to hate. But we actually feel, we don't wish the person well, and we feel like we hate them. But after that, we heal with God's help. And remember, it's over time. And as we come through all those steps, then we are able to forgive. And what can help us as we remember this? And Rev Edwards alluded to this earlier. Matthew 18, you know, the parable of the unmerciful servant is one that can remind us. After this guy really and truly had failed to repay his master millions of dollars, we'd call it now, he then went and was unmerciful to his fellow servant who owed him, you'd say, a nickel or a dime. So look at the very difference. When his master was going to put him in prison, he said, but he fell down before his master, begged him, please be patient with me and I will pay it all. His master was filled with pity for him and he released him and forgave his debt. And that's what God has done with us. In the same way, we need to be able to forgive others because God has forgiven us a lot. And so this quote from Louis Smedes reminds us, forgiving does not erase the bitter past. A healed memory is not a deleted memory. We're not senile, we don't have dementia. But still, instead, forgiving what we cannot forget creates a new way to remember. We change the memory of our past into a hope for our future. And that really makes a difference. And I like this functional description of forgiveness because how do we really know that we have forgiven? And this is what it says. By the choice of my will, not my feelings, I choose not to bring up these issues to the offender again. They are dead. That is the issues. I will not bring them up to others in the form of gossip either, nor will I bring them up in my own meditations. I can remember what happened, but I will not brood over the past. If my thoughts begin to focus on those past issues and hurts, I will stop them and replace them with positive thoughts about the good things in my present life. If the person who offended me has repented, I will look for ways to eventually rebuild a friendship. If not, I will still treat him or her as a forgiven person, even if my feelings send me contrary messages. I will choose to be loyal to my faith and stand by my choice to forgive. The hurts may come back from time to time for many months or even years, but I will not act on my feelings at those moments. Instead, I will reaffirm my choice to forgive, even if I have to do it every day for a long time. My feelings will eventually catch up with my faith and my hurts will heal in time. And I like that definition because it again reminds us that it's a process. It takes quite a while and we have to be patient with ourselves. This other quote will say, you will know that forgiveness has begun when you can recall those who hurt you and feel the power to wish them well. And if you remember the role play I just played where Sister Sharon, the Sunday school teacher, was saying to Pastor, I can't wish that person well. That is where you start. But when you can wish somebody well after, then you know that the process has begun. And so the last thing I want to do on this is share with you this song, A Heart That Forgives, which is a prayer. And then after that, we will go into the very last segment of the presentation. So let me find that song, A Heart That Forgives. And that, and come back here. Oh, 1 second, sorry, I did the wrong thing. Share.
I want a heart that forgives, a heart full of love, one with compassion just like yours above, one that overcomes evil with goodness and love, like it never happened, never holding a grudge. Want a heart that forgives, that lives and lets live. One that keeps loving over and over again. One that men can offend because your word is within. One that loves without price like you, Lord Jesus Christ. Want a heart that loves everybody, even my enemies. Want to love like you, be like you, just like you did. Want a heart that forgives. Want a heart that forgives when the ones that are closest, that I've known the longest, hurt me the most. I still want to love them just like you love me, even though I'm hurting. I want a heart that forgives when the pain is so deep, it's so hard to speak about it to anyone, just like your son. I give up my right to hold it against them with hatred inside. I want a heart that loves everybody, even my enemies. I want to love like and be like and just like you did. I want to walk like you, talk like, just like you did. Want to be like you, live like you, just like you did. 'Cause a heart that forgives is the heart that will live, totally free from the pain of the past. And the heart that lets go is the heart that will know so much freedom. Lord, I want to let it go. Hey, hallelujah. God, I need to let it go. Lord, it's been holding me back, and I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it no more. I don't know exactly what to do to get rid of it, but here I am, Lord Jesus. Here I am, oh, here I am, Lord Jesus. Oh, Lord, I need you, I need you. I know this is me that you're talking to. This is me, this is me, this is me, Lord, this is me. Lord, I let it go. Every person that's ever hurt me, gotta let it go. Every single heart, gotta let it go. Every single pain, gotta let it go. I let it go. I let it go. Lord, you can have it. 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 You can have it now. You can have it now. 'Cause I don't want it no more.
So only God can help us to forgive. To truly live, we must forgive. And as the well-known quote goes, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and to discover that that prisoner is you. And so we turn over now. We've looked at mediation, we've looked at forgiveness, and I turn over now to Rev for the final segment.
Thank you very much, Sister Sharon. There's so much more There's so much we have learned and have been reminded of about forgiveness. And there's so much more to learn. I really hope that your Sunday school students or your members who and counselees and those you share with will always take some important lessons from this encounter and apply them to their lives, because the forgiveness issue is so important. Failure to forgive leaves you or leaves the person who fails to do so in a prison. And the story with Jesus in Matthew 18 is a very typical case of that. Man was left in prison for the rest of his life because he just failed to forgive his neighbor. We want to talk a little more about as we continue on this last discussion, our last segment. And there's so much to share and there's so little time. You'd never believe that we have, over these last couple of weeks and months, that we have been talking so much about the concept of conflict and the cause and consequences. And we have been talking about cause and characteristics and consequences. And we have been talking about cure. And in cure, we talked about mediation and forgiveness. And now we just want to look at the whole area of of a change of heart and the ways in which we take a change of heart approach to deal with some of the conflicts we encounter. It will be difficult to finish this dialogue with you without commenting on this. Much of what I have to say will take a little more time than the time we have, but I'm going to do my best to condense, and I'm going to do my best to share so that at least the salient points in this sharing is received. And in dealing with a change of heart, I am reminded of this song, "Change My Heart, O God, Make It Ever New." And it is based on Psalm 51, with David, after he had committed adultery with Bathsheba, he cried out to God in his state of penitence, asking the Lord to forgive him. "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." In a change of heart, there must be, it's an essential strategy for moving forward. You can't move forward unless you're willing to change your heart. And any kind of strategy you develop for meeting the neighbor, for meeting the person who offended you or the person you offended. Let's remember, we can be the ones who cause offense, as well as we can be the ones who are offended by others. Our self-perception is very important. It is where we must be able to say, I am capable of making a change. That's absolutely important. I am capable of making a change. It is liberating. It is empowering to know that, I can make a change. And that's what God wants us to do. We all need to think so. There are persons who will say, me, I will never, ever forgive. I will never, ever change my attitude to that person. I will never, ever forget what they have done. And you'll say that to the point where you say, anyhow, I get a chance to do them in or get even with them, I'm going to do it. It is where there is the absence of a willingness to change, and the change has to begin with you. So it is where you are saying, I want to make a change. I want to make a change where my faith is concerned. I really want to allow my faith to influence how I function. I want to allow my faith to influence how I behave in relation to my neighbor. I really want to allow my faith to be concrete, to be incarnate. It has been said that Pope Francis made the observation that the prayers that are said in the hospital bed are far more sincere and genuine than those which are said outside. We have to think about that. What does our faith mean? And we say we love the Lord, we say we love our enemies, we say we believe in the Lord, but someone has been offended and we find it hard. So we have to be able to make that change. We must want to make that change. So it depends on our values as well. It depends on the values we have. It depends on the values of our family.
True.
Okay? What we have inherited within our family. And so it depends on our community. If we are from an unforgiving community, I worked in a community years ago as a pastor. And that community, there always conflict. And even now, after 30 odd years away from that community, there are people who are fighting and they don't know why they fight. When you ask them why, they say, well, my father used to fight and my father used to fight. And so we just have to continue it. So the new generation that is coming about, they do not have a reason for maintaining the conflict. But it's as if it's a generational practice. They have to maintain that, the conflict. And so I want to change in my family. And I want my family to change. And maybe you are from a family where everybody is a non-believer. Everybody takes a very hard line and a hard position. You may just be the one who's going to be different. You may be the one who will say, you know, if I make a change, if I demonstrate what the power of God can do in my life, perhaps I will see a difference. And you may want to change for the future because you change. You begin to create a trend for persons who model your behavior, and you break the cycle or the curse that they talk about of unrepentance or the cycle of resentment. There are some families through generations, even families have conflicts. And we say that, I mean, I've known of people who die. A colleague of mine died some years ago and his children never went to his funeral.
Wow.
It's painful. They were alive, they weren't away, they weren't living in US and he died here in Jamaica. They were there, but they never there. Some conflict within the family, and they decided not even to attend this funeral. Isn't that painful? And so sometimes, I mean, it's a different thing when you can't go to the funeral of your loved one because they died of COVID and they are totally isolated and you can't make your proper goodbyes. It's a different thing. I want to make a change. So there are practical responses to the notion of forgiveness. And as I said, we're going to see how much of these we can squeeze in. And some of these is that one has to review your past conflicts. You have to assess, look at what these conflicts were, areas of betrayal, rejection, abandon, where you are, and these may have been some of the things that may have caused conflict in your life. Assess the communication skills of those involved. Sometimes you find that you want to communicate, but the others may not be open to communicate. They may not be open to listen. So you have to be able to manage that. You have to read the body language of the individuals, read the body language of the persons you go to, that you seek to interact with. What is it saying? Is it open to negotiate? Is it open to dialogue? Or is it a closed situation? And sometimes you may find persons are very, one person may sit with their posture towards you, another sit with their posture away from you because they are not open. Look at these two people seated. They're not facing each other to show that they really want to have a dialogue. One is sitting by the side. Talk to me side. Just talk to me side. I'm not facing you. I'm not ready to have any serious conversation. So we have to bear that in mind. And when you're going to communicate, because that's a critical thing in dealing with, in moving forward, is that you have to listen actively. Listen to what the other person is saying. Don't listen with the intention of rebutting. When you listen with the intention of rebutting, you're not hearing what the other person is saying. You're just hearing what you want to say when they finish talking. Okay? So you have to listen with the intention of understanding. In that situation, when you meet the other person, relax. Sometimes you create a context and you have to relax. You have to, we talk about observing body language, which you have to read. Develop interest in the other person's interest as well, because you can't expect persons to pay you attention and you have no interest in what they do. So you have to be able to ask for clarification where necessary, plan what you're going to say before, so this is well worked out. Tailor your words to the person, know the person you're speaking to, and make some adjustment as you deal with them. Determine the best timing to be able to do that. Determine the best place to meet, whether you meet at church, or you meet at the family's home, or you meet at a neutral place, or you meet in an open place, not in a building, or you meet in a place where you can, nobody has to hear what you have to say. And then, why is the conversation necessary? Make some assessment of that so you can get into dealing with that. I'm going to show you quickly some styles of handling this conflict. And one of them is what we refer to as the accommodating style. It is the bear. The accommodating style is where you are seeking to, you want to maintain the relationship at all costs. So it is where you are prepared to give up something in order to win. So that's accommodating. You don't reveal your needs, your perceptions, or feelings to the other. You agree by going along. You look down, you go away, or use an indirect body orientation. That is where you are accommodating. It is where this is win-lose situation, and it is used when one party is willing to forfeit their position. And it is best used where one party wishes to indicate a degree of fairness, and people wish to encourage others to express their own opinion. So sometimes you cannot accommodate the other, but it is win-lose. It is when you are accommodating, it is lose-win. So you give up in order to win. The other is a compromising one, is a foxy one. We always talk about compromise. And the critical thing about compromising is that there's a common ground in that you want to maintain the relationship. That is why I hear people always say couples would compromise, or let us compromise, members compromise, or groups compromise, because the goal is that it's directed toward a quick fix sometimes. It's win-lose in this situation, but it reveals surface needs, but conceal underlying needs. But in the compromise position, the real idea is that you want to achieve an agreement when all the parties have equal power. So it's not where one person is more powerful than the other, but you want to achieve agreement, and you can when you're at the same level. So it's parties at the same level, two siblings. It is not a parent and child. It's a compromise where it's two groups within the church, and you want to arrive at the best possible solution. So use a compromise. I'm going through these quickly, but follow me. Avoiding one is where you lose-lose. The avoidance situation is neither party takes action to address the issue involving the conflict. You just don't face the conflict at all. You talk around it, you go over it. It remains unresolved. So it's like a turtle that pulls its head in the shell. So you avoid the issue. You have to watch that. This is also personality related. There are some personalities who say, boy, I don't like confrontation, so I'm not saying anything. But the thing is still there. You might not like the confrontation, but it is still there. So the avoiding technique, don't go very far. All it means is that you direct your energies to at the problem by lose-lose. Don't reveal your own needs or perceptions or feelings to the other. You look away, you fidget, or you leave. It is an approach that is used if all concerned feel that the issue is a minor one and will be resolved in time without any fuss. So if persons feel that this is a small thing, it is not any big thing, eventually we'll get over it, that's fine. When the parties need a chance to cool down and spend time apart, then you can say, let's avoid this right now, but then we have to face it at some time. You can't avoid indefinitely. It will have to be addressed. Or it could be where you are competing, and this is a shark one. The shark one in the competition is where there is a win win-lose situation. Okay? Win-lose situation. One party attempts to win the conflict through dominance and power. And this approach is used when all other methods have been tried and they have failed. So it's just win-lose. Boy, it is my way and I'm going to be a shark in this. You accuse, you label, you blame the other. You use words such as should or must, as we talked about earlier. You use you language. You are the one who caused this problem. You are the one who did not take up this. You are the one who came late. You are the one who started the fight. And so you do all the you, but you take no I. And that is the competing one. Okay? So it is where you have tried other things. In this situation, where unpopular changes need to be applied, and the discussion is not appropriate. And then there is collaborate. I will come back to the owl. Very wise, very smart. And the objective here is to use your energies to defeat the problem. You want a win-win situation. So collaboration is win-win. It is the most effective but most difficult way of managing differences and conflict. It requires trust and commitment on all sides to reach a resolution by getting to the heart of the problem. All parties need to be willing to empathize and try to understand each other's situation. Collaboration is most appropriate when all parties are willing to investigate alternative solutions together that they may not necessarily have thought of on their own. So it is when you are willing to say together, you say, you know, we don't have to dismiss this member. We could find a way whereby we perhaps could suspend the member for a short while. We could keep it quiet, what the member has done, but the person will feel better and we all will know that we have addressed the matter. So it's a win-win situation. Listen attentively, use I language, and you generate options. Interestingly, there's another one that will not be found in many cases, but one of the things I had attempted to do at the beginning, but didn't really do, was to look at the whole matter, the difference between disagreement and conflict. A disagreement is something that is not as intense as a conflict, and a disagreement can happen with anyone. And what happens when you disagree is that you can agree to disagree. And so it is not a fight, it is not a struggle, it is a difference of opinion, it's a difference of position, but it is not conflicting. So when that happens is that your energy is used to accept the behavior and values of the other. You realize that you can't change the other person and you're not going to allow yourself to be changed by the other person, but you can coexist. It is where you are a Baptist, or you may be a Methodist, or you may be a Church of God, or you may be a Pentecostal, but it doesn't mean that the Roman Catholic person can't exist. It doesn't mean that the Adventist person can't exist. There are some things you may not do together, but you accept them as persons of faith, and that, hey, let us agree to disagree. All right, and those are some of the ways that you can see this particular approach in dealing with this agreement. So then, the relationship is just as important as the issue, and you both agree to disagree without ruining the relationship. And that therefore concludes the my part of the presentation in terms of looking at ways in which we can cure by changing our heart and changing our attitudes and changing our approach to deal and manage conflict. Some things I want to note, though, that as I wrap up, is to remember that if someone may ask, can conflicts, someone may say conflicts cannot be managed. Most conflicts may be managed through the utilization of either yielding, withdrawing, inaction, contending, some of the approaches that we have seen here. And all of these, you can gain some amount of management of the conflicts. All conflicts cannot be resolved because of how different we are. And so we may have to live with the fact that, hey, we can't resolve all of them. And that is why we suggest the approaches we suggested here. And it doesn't mean that every single conflict, as we have seen, must result in a winner and a loser. Not at all. There are times, many possible outcomes, as we have observed. There can be lose-win, win-lose, win-lose. So each person on that position with the compromise, you win a little, you lose a little. You win a little, you lose a little on the compromise spectrum. Or it can be win-win for everybody, or lose-win. So there are different approaches. So it doesn't mean that there's only one approach. So I just want you to bear in mind that with those approaches, we will look at some, take any questions you have now, and Sister Sharon will give you some homework.
Any questions?
Or comments? Or there's something you found helpful or something you may want us to focus a little more attention on, because there's going to be a part 2. Part 2 doesn't mean we're going to cover the same material we have covered. We're going to look at additional stuff. But if there's something that you would like us to spend a little more time on, we could incorporate this in our breakout rooms, or to have further discussion on those areas. So if there is something you really, really feel strongly about, that you really want us to explore this a little more, let us know as well.
Yes. And in the meantime, we know that we're on time. So the homework is as follows. I want to encourage everybody just to write a letter to yourself, okay? And that letter that you write to yourself is about a conflict either that you have or have had. And bearing in mind, what is the next best step to work through that conflict? And I'll just give you the acronym CORE again. Can there be cooperation? Ownership, what is my part? And it's a letter to yourself, eh? Ownership, what is my part in the breakdown of it? Respect and empathy. So again, a letter to yourself describing a conflict that you have or have had, and how can you get to the core, the heart of the issue, with cooperation, ownership, respect, and empathy. Now, it may or may not be appropriate to pass it on anywhere else. It's just a letter to yourself, explaining to yourself. And then once you have done that, then you can reframe it, reframe the whole situation by praying for the person with whom you have the conflict, and or have had the conflict, and then with God's help, paint a picture of what it would be like if that situation were resolved. It may or may not be resolved, because we said as far as lies with you, live at peace with everybody. Sometimes the other person, and that had come up early in the chat. I remember Conroy had put that in the chat, that sometimes the other person, doesn't do their part. But as far as lies with you, live at peace with everybody. So recapping, a letter to yourself, and thinking of how could you get to the core of resolving that conflict through this cooperation, ownership, respect, and empathy, and praying for the person. And with that, we just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for spending this time and sharing time and space with us on this platform. It has been our pleasure to share with you over the past few hours, and do pray that you have found it helpful and that you will also help others, be even encouraged to help others on the path of conflict resolution and forgiveness as we think of the chronicles of forgiveness, of conflict, and the anthems of forgiveness. God bless you.
And one thing as we wrap up, thank you very much, Sister Sharon, is to let you know that for the next session, you are going to do more of the talking, because we're going to give you role plays, we're going to give you exercises, we're going to let you do the talking, and then we hear from everybody what you have been saying. So you're going to get more opportunity to bring out what we know you have a lot of stuff inside that you want to share, okay? So
yes,
be prepared for part 2, where you are going to do some more talking. So thank you, and God bless you all.